tell them
We are the socialists.
no. So we tell them who we are.
Can I get from you?
We are the
Yeah, so let me
The link.
let's
the
get started and then.
mighty socialists.
Okay, who has a phone?
We
that
are
has
the
the-
socialists.
How you gonna
Mighty socialists.
I'm gonna take
You
someone's
can
phone.
take the link from any.
Everywhere we go.
Can you use enough?
Ela,
My comrade.
need your phone. We're live.
It's not charged.
We are
You're
on.
set up. You're good.
Salute.
You're good.
Is it off? Greetings, comrades.
Greetings.
Welcome. And today we are having a really important discussion, which is Pan-African in nature. But before I even introduce the discussion, I'll ask Comrade Maganga to maybe explain in a few minutes where we are and what Kombozi Library is about. And then we'll continue with the program.
Viva comrades, viva.
Viva.
Comrades, viva.
Viva.
Thank you very much, Comrade Zungu, for that. And thank you also to all who are gathered here today for this very important discussion. Today we are gathered at Kombozi Library. Kombozi Library is a progressive library. It's a progressive space where comrades are able to meet and to discuss and to go through material that is progressive, that is socialist, that is revolutionary. Kombozi Library was established in 2017 by comrades who have been in the struggle for a long time. Those comrades saw it fit to come together and to gather the material that they had been using and even contributing to and even developing throughout the years in the struggle. And they saw it fit to bring all that material together so that new generations of people in the struggle could be able to interact with that material. So since 2017, Kombozi Library has been existing and it has been serving as a space where comrades in all the different organizations can meet here and interact with the revolutionary material. In addition, of course, to simply serving as this platform, Kombozi also engages with people who are doing radical or revolutionary work in the communities. Kombozi, in conjunction with other organizations, participates in the organization of forums, events, and activities that are geared towards marking important and inspirational moments during our day-to-day organizing. We mark important days such as Kimathi Day, such as Pinto Day, such as Karimi Day, such as African Liberation Day, of course in conjunction with other organizations that do the same. And Kombozi Library also engages in political education, of course, also in conjunction with other organizations which participate in political education. In addition to being a member of Kombozi, I'm also a member of Revolutionary Socialist League, which also works hand in hand with the Kombozi Library as well as other organizations in conducting political education, in organizing and mobilizing for revolutionary change, and also in simply ensuring that there is reasonable progress in this society in which we live in. So I think that briefly introduces Kombozi Library. And I think I've also introduced myself. My name is Maganga once again, member of Kombozi Library, member of Revolutionary Socialist League. I'm very glad to be here today, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you, comrade.
Many thanks, comrade. I think I'll not even speak much. Mine will just be to introduce the discussion of the day and to introduce Comrade Petani, who has traveled all the way from South Africa to be with us on this great afternoon. Petani is a Pan-Africanist, he's a historian, he's a writer, an organizer, and also a board member of the Walter Rodney People's Library for Political and Ideological Education, or rather development. Over the period I've known Petani, his work has also really been strong in the Pan-African space and in terms of furthering Pan-Africanism. And for us here in Nairobi, it is always a great occasion whenever we can exchange with comrades from any part of Africa, whether on the continent or abroad. It is always great because it is through these exchanges that we learn about what is happening in other parts of the continent. We learn about different histories. We learn about how organizing is happening and the challenges that different organizations are facing in their organizing. And today, Petani will be talking about Robert Sobukwe. His talk is titled Lay Him Down on a High Mountain, the Political Legacy of Mangaliso Sobukwe. And so, Petani, I will not waste much time. Maybe I'll just ask that you introduce yourself and then just dive straight into it, because time might also misbehave with us, and it is appropriate that we start behaving against it early now. Yeah.
Okay. I will quickly and briefly start with a brief introduction of myself. As Sungu had already mentioned, I am Petani Matsibandera from South Africa, based in a small collective called the Walter Rodney People's Library, which is based in Pretoria. And it's a collective of different activists and Pan-Africanist comrades who believe that the ideas of Pan-Africanism are still as important as they were back in the past. And how do we then reconfigure the political goals or the political end goals of what Pan-Africanism is supposed to look like. But to even not waste time, today on the 27th of February 1978 was the day in which Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe passed away. But to mark this important occasion also, as I arrived in Nairobi on Saturday, comrades told me about one of the martyrs of the revolution here in Nairobi, Biogama Ponti, and then that is quite important for us to speak about these comrades or these revolutionaries who have been kind of overlooked and have not been recognized for their role in fighting the struggle, or in the context of South Africa in fighting apartheid, as Robert Sobukwe was the leader of the PAC then. But to base the discussion, it's important to look into the factors that made Sobukwe to be the icon that he is today, and kind of a figure that people want to look onto today. But briefly, I will speak about his brief bio, where he was born, and of course, I already spoke about how he died, but the bio on where he was born and the kind of political climate and movements that inspired him, and also what I will also speak about is to be about the defiance campaign of the ANC, which was part and parcel of what is known as the 1949 Program of Action, which was resolved in a conference in Bloemfontein of the ANC. But I will touch on that briefly when I speak about the question of the Freedom Charter. We can speak for a long time. I mean, as a member of the PAC, of course, I am deeply informed about the legacy and the writings of Mangaliso Sobukwe. But I will start with his brief bio of where he was born and the kind of political movement or the political climate that influenced him to be where he became, and the kind of dynamics that influenced probably what we call the formation of the PAC at the time. But many might not have heard about this. It's a very small area in the middle of the Karoo where he was born, in an area called Grafrenet, in the current province called the Eastern Cape today. That's where he was born in the year 1921. and then he will die at the age of 52 or 58 in 1978 in Kimberley, where he was banished after imprisonment. But the importance of Sobukwe as a political figure and a light bearer of Pan-Africanism in the context of South Africa is important in the sense that we look into how the struggle was being fought in South Africa at the time, and how the PAC was able to take the struggle forward. But before I get into that, I will just finish briefly on his bio. That he did his university at the University of Fort Hare, where many of African leaders at the time we eventually became one of the many African leaders at the time were studying at that university. And I think a political moment that was kind of important was a speech that he delivered as the president of the SRC at the University of Fort Hare, where he was speaking about the importance of the fact that where is Africa, what are we doing today, and what role can the youth play on the future of the African movement. But remember that at the time when he was at Fort Hare, there was only one big or strong political movement in which everyone belonged to, which was the ANC at the time. So he will then later, when he was a student at the University of Fort Hare, he will join what was known as the ANC Youth League. So the ANC Youth League was a collective of young activists in the ANC who believed that the path in which the ANC had taken was not the path of the revolution, and they had become reactionaries of some sort. So in that time, that's when he developed a document that was known as the Program of Action, the 1949 Program of Action. But he didn't write it alone. He wrote it with a fellow called Godfrey Peach. They were students together at the University of Fort Hare. But the importance of the 1949 Program of Action speaks directly to the political legacy that will later shape him as a revolutionary. I will just read a small preamble of what the 1949 Program of Action was all about. You can find it in the ANC website even today, strangely so. But of course, it is part of their history. It must be there, it must be preserved, and must be able to show where the movement of the ANC had deviated from being a revolutionary movement. So the 1949 Program of Action states that the fundamental principle of the Program of Action of the ANC is inspired by the desire to achieve national freedom. By national freedom, we mean freedom from white domination and the attainment of political independence. This implies the rejection of conception of segregation, apartheid, trusteeship, or white leadership, which also, of course, inspires white tutelage. But why is there an importance of speaking about the 1949 Program of Action as a tool for liberation? Essentially, simply because at the time when the Youth League was formed in 1949, it was formed in 1944, but in 1949 there was a very big congress of the ANC, which was held in Bloemfontein, which is currently the province of Free State in South Africa. And this congress became a watershed moment in the struggle of African people in South Africa, in the sense that it was just 1 year after apartheid. And apartheid was formalized in 1948, and the 1949 Program of Action, or the 1949 Congress of the ANC, was also supposed to respond to the crisis, or to the question of apartheid being formalized as a legal system in South Africa in 1948. So 1949 is the Congress of the ANC, which happens in Bloemfontein. And the Youth League, at the time, the president of the ANC was a fellow known by Dr. A.B. Kuma. and other contesting fellows were also contesting. But they themselves, the Youth League, favored the candidate by the name of James Moroka, whom they would lobby before the Congress for him to adopt the 1949 Program of Action. So the 1949 Program of Action was quite clear and important as a document in the sense that it outlined the importance of the African people having a goal to liberation by themselves without being led by white people, that white people are going to be helping them, that no, this is how the struggle must move and this is how the struggle must go. And the importance of that was that it was important to build confidence in the leadership of the African people without being guided by white people on what to do. That was the basis of the Program of Action of 1949. And that also included the fact that the implementation of that program implied that the activists and the members of the ANC at the time will start a program which is known as the Defiance Campaign in 1952. So the Defiance Campaign was a campaign in which there was defiance of apartheid laws, that there were separate beaches, separate buses. So people will go and ride on these buses, people will go and swim in these buses, they will impose themselves in spaces which were only secluded for white people. But before I continue beyond the 1949, I want to deviate a bit, and speak about one of the most important things that we see, or some of the important things that happens today in our movements is the problem of allyship. So what do we mean when we speak about allies? As I spoke in the last 2 weeks when we were in the residence in Tanzania, I spoke about the fact that how does the privilege that an ally has in coming into our movement. They must not impose themselves, or rather they must take direction from the oppressed people themselves who are trying to lead themselves towards liberation. And sometimes, as much as we need allies, we are stronger with allies, but even without allies, by ourselves, we can still be able to do it. That is what probably informed the formation of the PAC in 1959. Eventually, when we split from the ANC in 1958. But before I get into the thick or the core debates about the Freedom Charter and the formation of the PAC, I want to speak about the fact that Mangaliso Sobukwe, as a leader, or as one of the leaders of the Africanist movement at the time, clearly defined or understood the question of what was the crisis that can be brought by the questions of allyship. Because at the time in South Africa, we had Brian's favorite movement, the Communist Party of South Africa, at the time, in the early 50s. Of course, it was from the 1921 in South Africa. It was existing. But towards the 50s, in 1950 actually, the apartheid government passed legislation known as the suppression of communist activities in South Africa. So the Communist Party of South Africa was banned, and then it had to rebrand to become the South African Communist Party later. But then it was in 1954. It was banned in 1950. 1950 with the suppression of the of communism acts in South Africa in 1950. But that is also it is also important to note the historical significance of this moment, or how then the apartheid movement was also just branding anyone who was anti-apartheid as a communist, right? But before I continue, the thick of Sobukwe's political leanings, or what defined him as a leader, is highly between the period of after 52 of the Defiance Campaign of the ANC up until, I should say, 58 or 59 when the PAC was formed as a faction, as a movement that broke away from the ANC. But most and more importantly, that in the early 50s, we could see in other different countries that there was a level of rise in terms of liberation movements or guerrilla movements which were fighting against settler colonialism in different places, like in Kenya with the Mamau, and then in Ghana with the rise of Nkrumah's movement, and many other movements which were coming across Africa. But in South Africa, we had a difficulty at the time that the ANC had already existed for over 40 years at the time as a movement, but it had never really taken radical steps or radical action to try to fight against the apartheid government. And what then informed the question of the defiance campaign was that there was a formalization of apartheid as a policy in South Africa in 1948, and how were Black people responding to that formation, or how Black people were responding to the fact that there was a formation of an of apartheid as a legal system or as a ruling principle in South Africa. And the ANC at the time had already existed. Hence, the 1949 program of action to respond to what the white settler minority was doing in the country. And the program of action became a vehicle which was supposed to see off the liberation of the African people. However, now the problems which started to arise within the ANC themselves was the fact that in that time when now the Black majority led by the Youth League are starting to question what are we doing? How are we fighting? And who is leading this struggle? And to what end goal, or the kind of things that we want to achieve, right? So then it comes into the fact that in 1955 there was a gathering known as the Congress of the People, where different movements come together from different communities. Because in South Africa, we were a multiracial society. So there were Indians, there were colors, then there were blacks, and then you find also the white liberals, those who had a little sympathy towards the struggle of Black people. But much more importantly, what becomes the political trajectory, or what informs a faction within the ANC in the 50s, known as the Africanists. It's very important to note this, that in the 50s, the faction known as the Africanists in the ANC existed at the time. But that faction was primarily speaking about the ideas of how the struggle of the African people must be fought. And the difference between the Africanists and the broader membership of the ANC was that the Africanists believed that there's no struggle in South Africa that can be waged outside responding to the question of the land. And so when the Freedom Charter was adopted in 1955, it was later adopted because the resolution was not reached on that day. The problem with the Freedom Charter is that it avoided the correct nationalist definition of the South African struggle as one of the dispossessed versus the dispossessor. So it's at the time, if you look at the Constitution of South Africa today, its preamble, it says that we, the people of South Africa, recognizes the injustice of the past, blah, 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 blah. That whole Kumbaya nonsense that is supposed to bring us together as one people, right? So the Africanists were rejecting this question about that. The Freedom Charter says this: our people have been robbed of their birthrights to land, liberty, and peace by a form of a government founded on injustice and inequality. This is the preamble of the Freedom Charter. But according to the Africanists, it was supposed to be the African people have been robbed by the European people, right? So this is where the big difference comes between the ANC and the PAC. Is that in the whole broad churchism of the ANC, in 1955, they were defining the country South Africa as our people, right? So then the question then becomes that, remember the state of South Africa was formed, the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910. So before 1910, in South Africa, we had different colonies. We had the Cape Colony, we had the Transvaal, we had the Natal, and we had the Orange Free State. And 1910 comes just 8 years after the conclusion of the Anglo-Boer War. So the Anglo-Boer War, for comrades who are not informed about it, is that the Anglo-Boer War was a fight between the British and the Dutch settlers in South Africa, fighting off the land of the African people. So these people had the audacity to launch a war. It started in 1898 and it finished in 1902. So the war between the British and the Dutch in 1898 to 1902, known as the Anglo-Boer War, or some call it the South African War, but they can call it the South African War because, in actual fact, we don't recognize South Africa as a country even today, because South Africa was formed in 1910 without the consultation of the majority of the people of South Africa. And then now, the Freedom Charter of 1955 says that our people have been robbed by a system. Our people were not robbed by some beast or something which is invisible. Who robbed them? That's the question that the Africans were asking in that. And it was the European people who robbed them of their land. And that is where the Freedom Charter avoided to name the dispossessors of the land. And this is what the political tradition and thinking of Mangaliso Sobukwe and his Africanist comrades was all about. That no, we must name these people because we're not robbed by some invisible peoples. We know them, and the Europeans who robbed our land. And then you find the Freedom Charter, which was supposed to be adopted. In actual fact, the president of the ANC at the time, Albert Luthuli, will later confess that the Freedom Charter was a document that he did not know where it came from, because it came to the how can you go to a conference with the resolutions drafted already? For people to adopt it. You just go there with debate, and then you smuggle your own resolutions, which were resolved outside the Congress venue. This is why the Africanists were rejecting this document, the Freedom Charter in 1955, right? So it is important. It is important that to note, although that some points of the Freedom Charter might be progressive, the people will govern, there shall be land and justice. But who is the people? Because the people were never defined. And who are these people who are supposed to get justice and liberty in this country? And they've never been defined as the African majority or the indigenous African people of that settler colony called South Africa. So in 1955, we are told that we must accept a country called South Africa, which was formed in 1910. Without the consultation of the majority of the people. It was the Boers and the English who came together. Oh, guys, we've oppressed people enough. Let's just match this thing and call it South Africa. Without even consulting the people who are the indigenous people of this country. So in 1913, it goes further that in 1913 they dispossessed 93% of the land of the African people was dispossessed by an act known as the Land Acts of 1913. And the painful part about it all is that in today's constitution of South Africa, we start speaking about the question of dispossession. You know, if you want to claim land in South Africa, you cannot get back land if your land was dispossessed on the 12th of June, 1913. You can only start on the 13th of June, 1913. As if the aggression of Europeans in Africa started on the 13th of June, 1913. Whereas the first day in which Jan van Riebeeck arrived in the shores of South Africa, which was on the 6th of April, 1652. That is the first point in which there was an aggression and a dispossession of the African peoples and their land. So the political climate or the political debates which were happening at the time within the ANC were internationally led by people like Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, people like Peter Raboroko, and people like Madzunya, who was one of the leaders of the Africanists. But also it would be amiss of me not to mention Muziwake Anton Limbede, who passed away in 1949. He passed away in 1949, just before the Congress of the ANC. Muziwake Anton Limbede. So Muziwake Anton Limbede was more senior to the generation of Sobukwe and the likes. He was more like a mentor to them. He was a senior with together with a fellow known as Apim Da. You might know his son, who's a famous writer called Sexton Da. Sexton Da is the son of Apim Da. So Apim Da and Muziwake Anton Limbede were one of the most most important people who crystallized the idea of African nationalism, right? So the African nationalists believe that the question of nationalism, unity of the oppressed, and unification based on our historical origin as the African people was important. But here's the catch, right? So at the time, there was what is known as Herrenvolkism. Herrenvolkism is an ancient German word. I don't even know where Sobukwe got this word, but it's there in one of his speeches. So it's basically nationalism in the realms of Hitler and the Arab, Aryanization
What
of
word
Germany.
did you use?
Herrenvolkism.
What now?
Herrenvolkism is some old German word. I don't know what it means, but what I don't know how to define it. But what it means is that it is a form of narrow nationalism that is destructive. But the difference between African nationalism and narrow nationalism is these two things are different, right? So it was being said that no, the Afghans are racialists because they want to create a parallel system to what the apartheid government is creating, and it's very much important to understand that, as Lenin writes in 1920, what's the paper? And no, he writes a paper about the struggles in the colonies. What does he title it?
I think it was the colonial
Question
right,
and
right
to
to
self-determination. Yes, right. So Lenin in that paper he writes that the struggle in the colonies is going to take a form of nationalism, right? So the national question now. You're a proper Marxist. The national question and the liberation in the colonies, right? And also Stalin also weighs in. He has a book that he speaks about Marxism and the question of self-determination, right? So it was obvious that in the colonies, to be able to mobilize the people, that we are going to look now. For example, with the Mau in Kenya, you're able to look. That is the white man. He's my enemy. He took my land, and we mobilize on the basis of the fact of our blackness, and also on the fact that we are the African people who are dispossessed of our land. And that was the basis of the African nationalism, which was being projected by the PAC or the Africanists at the time. But to most people who were anti the ideas of African nationalism, they would say that no, the Afghans are trying to do reverse racism or to do what the Afrikaners were doing, of excluding other people just to being by themselves. And so clearly articulates this that it's important that we build confidence amongst the oppressed, that they have belief in themselves, that they can carry out their struggles. Because the question of liberation themselves is their sole responsibility, without the tutelage of white people. That is why I spoke about allyship earlier on. That the allyship of the white communists in South Africa, your favorite Joslo was in likes, and Bentro, who recently passed away a few years ago, was one of the people who wrote the Freedom Charter. And they deliberately not mention the fact that when we speak about the question of the land, why is not being named that it is the European who have dispossessed the African people of their land. And this was supposed to be made clear because remember the 1949 Program of Action said that the African people will go for it by themselves to win liberation, to find themselves in a better position so that they can be able to win. But now, when it comes to the question of the Freedom Charter, it is being where they're beating around the bush. They're speaking about our people. How are they our people when we have not resolved the national question? When we have not resolved what is the name of this country in actual face? I mean, like, what gives the European the guards to come from Europe and want to name our country South Africa? What gave them that right? Right. So when between 55 and 58, this was a very important moment in the PAC. I mean, not in the PAC, in the ANC. That there was this 3-year debate which was happening within the party. The comrades were debating: should we remove ourselves from the ANC because now they've deviated from the line of the revolution, or should we continue to try and fight within the party and capture the important position in the party and reroute the political direction of the party? So then came a congress which happened in November 1958 in Orlando, in which, in actual fact, that marked the split of the Afghanists from the ANC. Day one of the credentials, the general secretary of the ANC at the time was none the other except O.R. Tambo. I'm sure many of you know O.R. Tambo. He was the general secretary of the ANC in 58 at the time. So of course he was responsible for administration, which branches correlated with Congress credentials and stuff like that. So that debate has reached its peak at the time. So he opens his address by attacking the Africanists, saying that there's some element which have developed amongst even the membership of the party, who are trying to emulate the racial ways or the racist ways of the oppressors. But furthermore, and more importantly, what happens in the Congress in the second day of that Congress is that when Congress breaks on day one, for the following day, when the faction or the group of the Africanists goes to Congress, they were barred from Congress and told that your branches don't meet credentials, so therefore you will not be able to take part in the Congress. And of course, there were scaffolds, and then they were thrown out, right? And that's when they convened in the house of a fellow known as Tlakolibalo, just near the hall of Orlando. And then a letter was written where the Africanists says that they are not breaking away from the ANC actually. It is the ANC who have broken away from the Program of Action of 1949. So therefore, they are continuing to be the custodians of the 1949 Program of Action, which was important in how the struggle of the African people must be directed. And this is where one should say the political legacy or the political unfolding of the lives of Mangaliso Sobukwe becomes important, because 1959 basically was the last year in which was free. He was a free man, relatively so, because of course he was the first black person in South Africa who was a victim of apartheid. So in 1958 November, the PAC, the Africanists break away from the ANC to protect the 1949 Program of Action, and they will later converge on the 6th of April 1959 in Orlando, deliberately so. The 6th of April. Why is the 6th of April important? So as I said earlier, is that on the 6th of April 1959, that is when the PAC was formed. But 6 April 1652 was the day Jan van der Beek arrived in the shores of South Africa with his 3 ships. They're called Drometras, Reker, and Kudeho. Those are the 3 ships that he came. In fact, those who like to indulge on alcohol, there's a famous whiskey called 3 Ships in South Africa. So the 3 Ships whiskey in South Africa is paying homage to the Dutch settlers who were passing to India, because they were waiting for the Dutch East Indian Company to get fresh refreshment. So that 3 Ships whiskey is a remembrance of the 3 ships of Jan van der Beek, which landed in South Africa as well today. So when you are getting drunk in the 3 ships, I'll buy for you when it comes to South Africa. 3 ships, yes.
It is available in Kenya.
Is it in Kenya?
It is.
It is.
So when in the formation of the PAC in 1959, they say that today, 367 years ago, proclaimed the Africanists began the act of aggression against the sons and daughters of Africa, by which African people were dispossessed of their land and subjected to white domination. This is an address that is made by Sobukwe in the 1959 launch of the PAC, 6 April 1959. So it is important to be able to understand why the PAC was formed, because in fact why that date was important on the 6th of April, because it was a movement which was launched, as Williams said in 1900 in the first Pan-African Congress, that it was a protest against colonialism. So the formation of the PAC was never beating around the bush. It was direct that our aim is to overthrow white domination in South Africa. So when the PAC was formed in 59, it was only 11 months old when it was formed. Only 11 months old when it was banned in the following year. So April 59 to March 1960. That's how long the PAC existed before it was banned. But the importance here is that in that time of the formation of the PAC, Sobukwe and the likes of Madunya and the other Africanists who were leaders of the PAC had made a vow that by the next year they will have recruited at least 100,000 members before they go to Sharpeville, and they will crisscross the whole of South Africa at the time to mobilize every black person who was for the idea of liberation. And it was very easy for the PAC to be able to mobilize many black people at the time. Although we did not have the organizational culture of the ANC, but the movement was growing quickly because it was speaking about the important things of the slogan which they went by was Africa for Africans. In actual fact, in our recruitment was so severe that we were even recruiting gang members. In fact, the line of the talk, "Lay him on a high mountain," comes from a poem written by the late John Matera, who passed away last year. It was one of the gangsters who lived in a place called Sophia Town in the 50s. And according to Sobukwe, even every African had to be recruited to be able to join the movement of the Africanists. So it didn't matter if you are a Lumpen proletariat or whatever, you were going to be recruited. Even gang members were recruited to be members of the PAC. But the importance about this is that in that 11 months before the PAC was banned, Sobukwe at the time had already acquired a job of being a lecturer at the University of the Witwatersrand. Was a lecturer in African languages. He was teaching African languages in the University of the Witwatersrand. So the 21st was Monday. So 3 days before the 21st was the 19th, right? No, it was the 18th. 1921, yes. So on the 19th of March 1960, Sobukwe writes a letter to the University of the Witwatersrand and says that circumstances have arisen that require me to resign from my post as a teacher, or as a lecturer at the University of the Witwatersrand, because on Monday there's going to be a showdown finally between the oppressors and the African people who are seeking liberation. And the importance of this part is that the level of dedication that Sobukwe had. At the time, he was already married. His wife was a nurse. We buried her in 2018, Mangaliso Sobukwe. She was in her 90s when she passed on. But the importance and the dedication that Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe had displayed on the question of liberation. You see, a man who could have went to live his middle-class life as a lecturer at the University of the Witwatersrand, one of the most biggest white universities in South Africa. He decides to write a letter that is resigning from the university and is going to lead the African people on the following Monday. So Sharpeville was a very simple thing. So Sobukwe said that, okay, remember at the time in 1960, women were not allowed to work. Only men were allowed to be part of the workforce. And the campaign that the PAC first launched was the Positive Action Campaign. So the Positive Action Campaign was about no, it was not the Positive Action Campaign. It was the Status Campaign. So the Status Campaign was speaking about was about the fact that we want to be respected as human beings. Hello.
Was there ever a time when the PAC used the term positive action?
Positive action. Yes.
Nice. Interesting.
You're linking it in Nkrumah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get to that part. Yeah, I'll get to that part before we just go to Sharpeville.
So,
So then the importance of the Status Campaign. The Status Campaign was that we are human beings, because at the time in 2060, you were to walk around South Africa, you had to carry a pass. So to move around, if I'm going to a shop there and I meet a white person, I must produce the pass. Where are you going? Oh,
What's
yeah,
a dom pass?
So a pass is like a modern day passport.
A passport.
Yes.
What's
Like
it called?
an egg.
Kipande.
In Kenya.
So you could not move to white spaces or white towns, because remember, black people had to live in the townships. So you had to move around to present yourself that you are a citizen of this Bantustan or this township. We are allowed to be a member of this country called South Africa, whatever that is, because it didn't make sense, because there was South Africa and then there was Bantustans, and you could not call that a country. But anyway, the importance of Sharpeville, 21 March, which we're going to commemorate in the next few weeks when I go back home, is that it was a simple action. All men are going to present themselves for arrest, and we are going to leave our passbooks at home. Simply because when all the males who are members of the workforce are arrested, it means that there will not be any economic activity in the country, right? So the day presents itself, actually on the Monday also. The day presents itself that the 21st of March 1960 arrives. And this is where I should say Mangaliso Sobukwe crossed this political Rubicon as a leader of one of the most biggest uprisings in settler colonial South Africa. After a lull period in which, I mean, the ANC was formed in 1912. It's very important, right? I'll get to that part in the next few minutes. The ANC was formed in 1912. The PAC was formed on the 6th of April 1959, right? And in its 11 months of existence, the PAC was banned on the same day as the ANC. ANC was already 40-something years old at the time, but the PAC was only 11 months old when it was banned. So what happens in Sharpeville, but it's important that we don't speak about Sharpeville only because Sobukwe lived in Soweto at the time, and then it was across the country uprising that we are going to present ourselves for arrest on this day. So then Sharpeville comes on that day. Sobukwe was in Musolo, in a place called in Soweto. That's where he presented himself. And then in Val, they were led by a young man by the age of, was 19 years of age at the time, by the name of Nyakane. So it's very important because sometimes you might question why Sobukwe was not shot or anything of that nature, because if he was in Sharpeville, if something had happened to him, he was in Soweto, and the other complaints were that the biggest numbers of people which came were in Sharpeville, and also at the same time we cannot forget what also happened in Langa, in Cape Town. So people were killed in Sharpeville; they were also killed in Langa on that very same day.
That's why they call it the Sharpeville Langa massacre.
Yes, the Sharpeville Langa massacre. So we cannot just only call it Sharpeville Day. Well, it is bastardly known as the Human Rights Day in South Africa today. Right. In actual fact,
You would say bastardized.
it was bastardized, yes, as the Human Rights Day. In actual fact, the government of the ANC, which came into office in 1994, was refusing to acknowledge 21 March as a public holiday in South Africa. They had to compromise and call it 21 March, Human Rights Day. But in actual fact, it must be called the Sharpeville Massacre, the Sharpeville Langa Massacre Day, because it has to remind us. Because what is this Kumbaya thing of human rights? Kumbaya thing, human rights. Yeah. But at the time, we were not all recognized as humans. It's Kumbaya thing. We're going to just say human rights thing. We were speaking about the Sharpeville Massacre, the Sharpeville Langa Massacre. That's why it's important to be able to go. So even kids born today, they don't even know what is Sharpeville.
We are human rights.
No, we're not saying human rights are not important, but human rights are important. Right?
Africa is the only human rights defender here. It believes in human justice and social justice.
Okay, but also in the language of people of comrades in the Afro-Pessimist school, they are able to explain better than myself. But it's a very important discourse to get into. When those who are able to explain better can explain better, but I cannot be able to do that. So, but
don't limit yourself.
Yeah.
You
No.
can stay a lot of.
I'm not an Afro-Pessimist. I'm not an Afro-Pessimist. Those who know can speak about much better about the discourse of human rights and why they don't recognize it as important. But it's something else that we can speak about on another day. But the importance of when Sharpeville happens, Sobukwe gets arrested in Mufolo, and the other leadership of the PAC gets rounded up, and then they were all thrown in the constitutional court jail. It was called number 46 at the time. So that's where they were arrested, and then Sobukwe was sentenced for 3 years between 1960 and 1963 for incitement of violence. And then it's important, between 1960 and 1963, he was not in Robben Island. He was in 46, and then later he served the rest of the 2 years in the prison in Witbank, which is currently the province of Mpumalanga. But then in 1963, he was supposed to be released. So then, in that whole time, the government of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, so it was a republic now, it was no longer a union. In 61, it became a republic. Sat in Parliament and said that this man cannot be released from prison, even though his sentence was 3 years. So Parliament enacted a law which was later known as the Sobukwe Clause. So the Sobukwe Clause was a special clause designed by Parliament to keep Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe in prison until the sight of eternity. He will be imprisoned. Every year they will renew that clause for 6 years. And what is mostly important to note is that when Sobukwe was taken to Robben Island, he was isolated. He didn't stay in the main in the main cells where everybody was arrested. He was put in a special house. I know, but no, this man is too dangerous. He's going to influence people. I know.
When he was taken to Robben Island, was this in any way materially connected to the rise of the Black Consciousness movement? Was there any sort of connections? Because, like you said, Biko would begin that whole thing around that same time, right?
Yes.
70s?
No, 60s.
60s.
Yeah, 60s.
Yeah.
So, no, I'll get to that. Okay, so the rise of the Black Consciousness movement starts mostly in the late 60s. I'll get to that when I speak about Biko and the comrades of the Black Consciousness movement, and eventually the 1976 uprising. In the 3 years, in which, not the 3 years, the 6 years in which Sobukwe was in Robben Island, he was isolated. He was not allowed to mix with other prisoners when who were in Robben Island, just simply because they feared him to a point where they believed that if they will dare mix him with other prisoners, it will influence them either way to try and continue with the fight. But what is also important is that after the 6 years, in the fifth to the 6 years of his imprisonment under the Sobukwe clause in Robben Island, that's when then he started to become sick. That's when they had to release him. But when they released him, he was not a free man either. So between 69 and 28, when he will eventually die, he was banished to Kimberley. Kimberley is some Karoo area it's very close to Namibia, to the Namib desert side. It's a very much an arid area. That's where he will live for the rest of his days until he died in 1978. But in between 69 and 78, it's also very important to speak about the role in which Mangaliso Sobukwe played in giving guidance to a young Steve Biko, for example. So that's why I say that it's not the early 60s, it's the late 60s when after Sobukwe was released, when Biko formed SASO. Yeah. SASO was formed in 1968. So for those who are not well aware of what is SASO, so there was a movement called NUSAS. So NUSAS was a Kumbaya movement of all black and white students in the University of South Africa. And then when Biko went to the University of KwaZulu-Natal at the time, University of KwaZulu-Natal, which is today is not the University of KwaZulu-Natal, he formed a movement called SASO. And SASO was an exclusively black-only students movement, because that's where it became important for black students to organize among themselves to be able to channel their interests and their needs and what they imagined for it to be, right? But let me have some water. I think I'm speaking too much.
This is also the South African Students Organization.
Yes.
Okay.
Long live
Mangaliso Sobukwe.
Long live.
Okay. I think it's a lot.
Did Sobukwe have had any sort of socialist or communist linkages? Like, was he in any way his ideological commitment? Like, did he have like that sort of socialist communist ideological sort of grounding?
Okay.
And to link up with that, the Pan-African, it's called PAC.
Pan-African Congress of Tanzania,
The
yes.
Pan-African Congress of Tanzania,
Yes.
which I know Sobukwe played a major role. Was it associated to the South African Communist Party, or what was its ideological leaning?
Yeah, I think
Comrades, I'm giving Petani 10 more minutes, then I open up the discussion, if that's okay. So he finishes, he's almost done.
Okay, yeah, I'm noting that question, but something that is very important to address also, because Kashagi, you'll keep your question for later.
No, I'm saying that we should allow you as a main speaker to finish. So
Okay.
don't interrupt.
So this is, in fact, this is it's a very complex issue. Alu, in the sense that in 1921, I don't even know to speak about this, it's very personal to me. In 1921, the Communist Party of South Africa was formed, right? And then 1922, there was the Rand revolt of workers revolting. You know what the Communist Party of South Africa had a banner? It said that white workers of the world unite. A whole entire Communist Party saying that white workers of the world unite. And what about black workers? Is that a Communist Party? They have not been a Communist Party. And I stand by this. I've made this argument for a very long time. That the formation, unfortunately, in South Africa, the representation of communism coming from the Communist Party of South Africa. Sobukwe actually will call them quacks. That's what he called them. Not that the PAC rejected communism. It did not reject communism. Why? I should tell you why. It was mandatory. It was mandatory to be, when you become a member of the factional group of the Africanists, that you must read Pan-Africanism or Communism by Padmore. That was the Bible, right? And if you have engaged Padmore, you will know that Padmore does not make a conclusion to reject communism.
George Padmore.
Yes, yeah, George Padmore. There's no other Padmore. Except if you are modern day Padmore. But in the meeting of the Third International in the 30s, there's a fellow called Banting. I think his wife was called Sarah or something. But him, the two of them, they go there to the Communist International meeting in Moscow to represent the Communist Party of South Africa, right? To say that no, we're representing the oppressed people of South Africa, and then they were given their time to make their submission, and they said that in South Africa there is no land question; it's a class struggle. That's what they said. If you read Harry Haywood's book, it's called The Black Communists. No, The Black Bolsheviks. He speaks about that. He speaks about this event and says that these two representatives, white representatives from the Communist Party of South Africa, they come and tell us in the Communist International Movement meeting, say that in South Africa there's no land question. It's only a class struggle, and that is utter nonsense and bullshit. In the sense that the formation of South Africa became a settler colony, just like Kenya, just like Rhodesia, West Rhodesia, which is Zimbabwe today. They were settler colonies, and you cannot speak about a country being a settler colony without the question of the land, right?
It's the primary contradiction.
It is the primary contradiction, and then the importance of that. So now this Communist Party of South Africa, it's very also important to not just throw the baby away with the water, whatever the English people say. But there are some contributions that the Communist Party of South Africa made, right? But in essence, if it was indeed truly a Communist Party, it will not be a member of the alliance today. With the ANC. It says everything about this party, because the past 29 years they've been in a tripartite alliance with the ANC, and they claim to be communists. They've never been communists. They've always been quacks. And unfortunately, in South Africa, communism found a very bad representative in these white fellows who tried by all means. Because remember, I spoke about the 1949 Proclamation action. It was clear. You allies, white people, sit at the back. You won't have any leadership position. You will endorse what we're saying, how the movement is supposed to go. And then in 1955, they come with the Freedom Charter, which says that our people have been robbed of their land, liberty, and and freedom. But who's our people? In 1955, who are the people? In actual fact, the Freedom Charter says that we, the people of South Africa, declare that South Africa belongs to all the living in black and white. And in 1913, there was a question of land dispossession. They dispossessed 90% of our land. In 1955, the land has not been returned. So how then do you declare? Who had the land in 1955? It was white people. So when the Africanists within the ANC were saying, you communists who are working with the ANC, who are trying to influence the political position of the ANC, you are actually deviating us from the real struggle in South Africa. The real struggle in South Africa has always been about the question of the land, like any other settler colony in Africa, right? So there was no rejection to a certain extent, but I'm gonna get in trouble and get home for this because some comrades within the party believe that the PAC completely rejects communism, but that is not possible because if the ideological leanings of they lean themselves towards Padmore's Pan-Africanism or communism, you will know that Padmore does not make a conclusion to reject communism. He rejects how race, the question of race has always been negated. You cannot. We must understand that in the colonies, the question of class expresses itself through the question of race. That's what was happening in the colonies. So then, this fellow white people who are drunk, I mean, how are you going to tell us in 1948 that the question here we are seeing only a class struggle? Who's the class struggle exists, the white class and the black oppressed class.
I think Fanon says it best. You are wealthy because you're in the colony. You're wealthy because you're white. You are white because you're wealthy.
Yes.
To sort of bring this summation. So basically, what you're saying is that the PAC rejected the dogmatism of South African Communist Party doctrine.
Yes.
Not
communism. As a doctrine of liberation.
Of liberation.
Yes. So let me wrap up because Sungu is breathing on my neck here. But the importance of the legacy of Sobukwe today and how it informs the politics of South Africa is that he says in 1959, I think I will be able to recall this from my head. He speaks about the black leadership that has been captured. He speaks about this in 57. He says that there's a level of capture that has been happening in the ANC, and this black leadership claims to be leading the African people to liberation, but they have been captured. And this is what essentially it's not like the ANC woke up and deviated from the question of liberation at any day or any time. They have never been revolutionary. Well, to a certain extent, I would say between 49 and 55, when they adopted the program of action, they were revolutionary. I mean, when the ANC was formed in 1912, they took a ship there to the Queen to petition her that bring back our land. No, they didn't say bring back our land. They said that we want to vote, we want to have freedom rights and all these things, right? So, in essence, although it's one of the oldest liberation movements in Africa, I mean, you are old, but you have not even fulfilled the basic question of land in South Africa. And right now, as we speak, over 70% of the land in South Africa still belongs to white people, right? And when you look at the legacy that Sobukwe left behind, in the sense that what was the importance of the question of the land in South Africa, and when we came into the early 90s, in actual fact, in South Africa there was never serious confrontation between settler colonialism and the dispossessed people, because we just came to early 90s, and then we had to do negotiations. But there was never real confrontation about the question, the most important basic thing that we're fighting, the land. And as I said earlier, that there's a clause, section 25 of the Constitution of South Africa. It says that you can only claim land in South Africa, which was taken after 13 June 1913. That's the only time we can claim back the land, right? But as if we did not have 100 years of the frontier wars, which happened in the province of Eastern Cape today, where the Xhosa people fought bravely for over 100 years. I'm talking about 100 years, I'm not talking about 10 years. 100 years of people fighting against white people's disposition of their land. And then you want to tell us that these events never happened. So, in today's time, in today where South Africa is, we don't have the land. Well, just like any other country, as Nkrumah will predict that neocolonialism is going to be the biggest struggle that we have to fight in our countries today. But in conclusion, wow, you know when Congress concludes 5 minutes. In conclusion, I should say that the engagements of Sobukwe and his political bravery and the sacrifices that he made for the country that is known as South Africa today are quite important and glaring in a sense that he did predict that this captured leadership of who claims to be leading black people are still in them dreams. And we saw it in the early 90s with the negotiations, what you call them, CODESA, Convention into Democratic South Africa. That they were nothing, just like the Lancaster agreements, which were made in Zimbabwe in 1979.
And in Kenya.
What do they call them in Kenya?
Lancaster Agreement.
Lancaster Agreement?
Yeah.
Oh, we're fucked, Africans. Oh, no, we're fucked. Yeah, so, so you know, why is it, if it was not, remember that in 1910, Britain gave South Africa independence. So that's why in South Africa we speak about the war against apartheid, not the struggle against independence, sort of. But it was still a thing of independence. Because 1910 we were apparently given independence.
So you were independent since 1910?
Yeah, apparently.
And then you finished it in 94.
How does it make sense? Like, so basically, what became of South Africa today is that we were called into this nonsensical thing called the TRC, where the dispossessed and the dispossessor must come. You know, in 1976, I killed Mang. I buried them here, and I'm asking for forgiveness. And we were mobilized into this bullshit thing of the Rainbow Nation. South Africa is called, in fact, when I was growing up in the early 2000s, I will not go a day or two without hearing about the Rainbow Nation on TV in South Africa. But yeah, the Rainbow Nation is doing well and all this. But in today's time, that thing no longer exists, which I'm very happy about. Because in South Africa, we've never resolved the national question. We've never resolved what is South African? What is this thing called South Africa? And who had the right to name this country South Africa in the first place? And we have not resolved the basis of the struggle that we're fighting. The struggle in which King Moshoeshoe was fighting. The struggle in which King Makata was fighting. The struggle in which Hinta's head, you know, the British still have Hinta's head. Well, the King Hinta was the king of the Xhosa people who fought against. He fought in one of the battles of the frontier was in 100 years. They took his head in the 1800s. They have not even returned it even until today. They still have his head, right? So the struggles which were fought by people like Shaka, which were fought by people like Tesfaye, were primarily the struggles about the question of the land. And you cannot speak about freedom and liberation in South Africa without the question of the land, because South Africa is a settler colony. And until the question of the land is resolved, until the land is returned to the indigenous African people, we cannot speak about liberation in South Africa. And this is the legacy that Mangaliso Sobukwe and the PAC gave us. Well, although my party today might not be as strong as it was in the past, but this is the legacy that was carried from the struggles which were fought by the kings of Africa, who fought many years against land dispossession. And without resolving the primary contradiction of the land, we're just going on sham bourgeoisie thinking of saying that we can actually have freedom and democracy in South Africa when we have not resolved the question of the land. Today we don't have electricity. I understand we don't have electricity. Primarily because South Africa is a neo-colonial state in which everything must be privatized for the benefit of the white people who have been. In actual fact, there was this bullshit thing called the State Capture Commission. In actual fact, the state of South Africa was captured on the 6th of April 1652 by white people when they arrived in South Africa. That is the original state capture. This state capture of the bourgeoisie is just people who are trying to capture a state. Commission. Yeah, the state commission is nonsense. It was people who are trying to capture a state which was already captured. And the original capturers are white people who have captured the means of production of the land. They've captured the land. They have the land. Everything is in their hands. And we cannot resolve these things so in a superficial manner without going on the basis and the basic contradiction in which Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe sacrificed his life for the land. Because when we say isolate and you say Africa, when we are saying that from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar, no settler has a single claim, has a single claim on any inch of our land in the continent. And when we speak about the land, we're not just speaking about agricultural land. We're speaking about what is below and beneath, and the atmospheres and the fish in the oceans of Africa. They belong to us.
Israel.
So when we speak about the land, we're not playing games. We're speaking about the struggle that was carried out by the Mau. In actual fact, we must capture Settler Williams. So Settler Williams is in South Africa, even today. He has not been captured. He's roaming the streets of South Africa, claiming that we have a kumbaya democracy and we must just fix the question of the no. Yeah. We must fix our democracy. Yeah, democracy is important, I understand. But it should not be defined outside the question of the land. I think that is the importance of the question of who was Mangaliso Sobukwe and the struggles that he lived for. I will clarify more questions when we go for question and answers.
Long live Mangaliso Sobukwe, long live. Long live. Long live Sobukwe, long live. Long live. For the Pan-African Movement Party forward. Forward. Long live our sister, long live. Long live. Forward with the land, freedom and food. Land, freedom and food. Forward. Forward with the land, freedom and food. Forward. Forward. Long live our struggle, long live. Long live. Forward with black consciousness. Forward. Forward. Forward with the Steve Biko spirit. Forward. Forward. Long live Steve Biko, long live. Long live. Viva.
Viva. Thank you.
From Cape to Cairo, from Morocco to Madagascar, Tanzania is related to Solitata.
Not from China. You cannot take the head from China. It's not possible. The another corruption of the song Azania.
Yeah.
The original song of the PAC says that Azania is related to Solitata bazooka. We're going to take it by the gun.
Yes.
You can't take it by the freedom charter because the freedom charter says that our land belongs to all living nations. So how are you going to use it?
We are saying social justice.
We don't see
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a contradiction when you say that we are going to take the land by the freedom charter. When the freedom charter says that our land belongs to all living nations. So how are you going to take the land from everyone that belongs to it? Because as we are saying, the land belongs only to the African people.
Yeah.
That's
Labor Zuka says, Labor Zuka.
No, but it's a form of
From the gun.
No,
Yeah.
the land
It's better even you say Solitata ne mau.
much better.
Anyway,
To Cairo, from Morocco to Madagascar, Tanzania is related. Solitata ne mau. From Cape to Cairo, from Morocco to Madagascar, Tanzania is related.
comrades, I asked that we proceed, but we are still coming back to the song. Yeah, because we are not forgetting our singing. Just before, Comrade Gasheke, you had a question? Okay. Thank you very much, Comrade, especially for reminding us of around the importance of resolving the national question and the primary contradiction in society. I knew I'm supposed to have given Aliu a chance to speak in between, but I realized he had a very thorough presentation, so I cut him off. I'll ask him to step in because he's part of the panel at this point in time. And I'll also ask Comrade Gashanja, who was moderating the discussion, to take this seat. I know you are held up with an event which by its very nature can be described as an emergency. I am not sure whether it is done, but in case you are now free, please feel free to take over and guide us in the discussion. But anyway, Comrade Aliu, You can come to this side. Then after your submissions, we will open up the discussion. We will open up the discussions and also enable comments and questions and everything. But also, comrade, as you make your submission, maybe please just remind us how Sobukwe relates to these contemporary times, the era of the social movement.
Thank you, Patani. It's always good to be here, and to talk with the comrades and to extend our struggles and to recognize the sort of legacies that we are with, and the legacies that we honor. We honor these legacies primarily because they are legacies that are not individual in nature. We honor people like Sobukwe and all these people like Kimathi, like Remindutu, like Sankara and Mao, and all the Rosa Luxemburg, Winnie Mandela, Josina Marshall, not because they were superhuman beings, but they show us what the human being can be capable of if they become selfless, if they are willing to submit their individual idiosyncrasies and desires to the well-being of and the aspirations of the masses. So before I go further, Petani has asked me to read this poem since Arusha for this event. It is written for Sobukwe on his death. It's called On His Death, right? Yes. It was our suffering and our tears that nourished and kept him alive. Their law that killed him. Let no dice be sung, no shrines be raised to burden his memory. Sages such as he need no tombstones to speak their fame. Lay him down on a high mountain, that he may look on the land he loved, the nation for which he died. Men feared the fire of his soul. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Long live Sobukwe, long live.
Long live.
Long live the spirit of revolutionary Sobukwe, long live.
So I'm just gonna speak very briefly. For me, one of the things I want to begin with is, the comrade mentions when Sobukwe resigned his job. And we see this as it repeats itself in the revolutionary history of Africa. We see Frantz Fanon being in Algeria as a psychiatrist under French colonialism, and then recognizing that these people don't even really treat these people. They don't treat them as human beings. You can only treat somebody if you treat them as a human being, right? And then he would write that famous resignation letter to the French and join the FLN, which was fighting militarily with the French. And then when Frantz Fanon would pass, he would in Maryland in the hospital, he would write a letter to his friend Roger. Basically, what this letter, if you look at it, what it means is that I didn't regret my decision. That I'm here, I'm dying. I wish that I was with the people, fighting with them, but I feel so powerless, to paraphrase what he said. And then we see it again in Amilcar Cabral, when he would come back as part of only 13 people who would have higher education in Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau. 99% of the country was illiterate, literally. Not ignorant, just illiterate. They couldn't read or write. And we have to make that distinction is important. He would work with the colonial government for 2 years. And then through that, he came back home with a mission as an agronomist, yeah? And now he studies 2 years, patiently, study the entire agricultural and land setup system in Guinea-Bissau, and then even goes up to Angola to do consultancy for the Portuguese government, and then just disappear off the face of the earth, and reappears as a founder of a party after doing scientific analysis of the colonial condition in Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau. You see, we see this recurrent theme that there comes a time where we all must make that decision. Whether we would want, of course, this is a very difficult question to answer, especially today when we have this NGOization of the struggle, where we are offered big chunks of money as organizations or as even individuals you know, to sort of do this, to do these things that never lead us anywhere near liberation. We who believe in the liberation of our people believe that we must always hold a very fierce ground for our liberation, that we cannot compromise. But what we have been taught to do today is to learn the art of compromise. I mean, look at Fanon. Like, that was a huge move. Like, it's very easy today, of course, to look at it and admire it and romanticize it. But at that time, there was nothing romantic about it. It was a conscious decision to break from the system, to sort of de-link. I mean, we'll talk about this, but there's a personal de-linking. And then you relink yourself to a selfless struggle that exists outside the currents of the bounds of the colonial and the neo-colonial state. And for me, that point is very important. Sobukwe did it, Cabral did it, Fanon did it, others did it. We must all commit some sort of class renunciation, class suicide, and you know, to hold on to that. The second point I will close with this is when we talk about African nationalism was born out of Pan-Africanism. It's not the other way around. Pan-Africanism gave birth to African nationalism. So as such, our nationalism can never be narrow. It has always had that internationalist perspective to it, because Pan-Africanism itself was born in the diasporas of Africa to a people who cannot lay claim to our land in Africa, because when they were being taken, or when their ancestors were being taken, there is no such thing as Kenya or Gambia. So where would they choose? Where would they say, I'm from? The only thing they can do is to totalize Africa as home. So our nationalism also cannot recognize the colonial state or the neo-colonial state in its bounds, in its geography, because it's an architecture of domination, it's an architecture these cartographies, these maps of that were not designed by us. Our people didn't choose to build a country called Kenya. We were not consulted. As far as I'm aware, I don't think they sat down the Kenyan people and told them, we are going to build this country, so we are supposed to, you know, let's work on together to build name this country, and like what you were talking about, like when they created the Union of South Africa. People who are supposed to be South African, who are Black African people, were not consulted. So how can we hold on to this sort of narrow nationalism? Like when you are crossing the border, Kenya and Tanzania, you can feel that tension. Yeah. You know, of a people who are the same people, you know. Gambia and Senegal is even more ridiculous where I come from, because Gambia is inside Senegal, but every time they're disputing about how great their nation is. This little country of 2 million people, they're always fighting with the Senegalese. These Senegalese, they don't respect us. So I tell you a funny story. In the 70s, 80s, they built the Senegambian Confederation. The Gambia and Senegal were going to, you know, that was the spirit, the zeitgeist of that time, where everybody was building their little federations, Mali, Ghana, Guinea Union. So the Senegalese said, okay, we'll do this union, but you guys will always be deputy presidents. Because at that time, Gambia, the population of Gambia was 600,000, and Senegal was in the millions already. So they were like, okay, we will agree, but you guys have always to be the deputy, we'll be the president. So the Gambians were like, feelings were very hurt, and they didn't do it. So in conclusion, I just want us to remember that there is a personal cost to fighting liberation, and it's a cost that goes beyond just material and personal sacrifice. It also is a sort of intellectual sacrifice that we must make. We must study. We must be clear about what we want and what we don't want, who are our friends and who are not our friends. And that our struggle is not against a personality. It's against a system that is made up of human beings. And that is very important. And that we totalize our struggle. We are not fighting for only economic justice. We're also fighting for political self-determination. We're fighting for the natural world to be salvaged from this beast called capitalism. You know, and so that's important. And that our nationalism is not predicated on xenophobic, Afrophobic, or any form of phobia against a people. Our nationalism actually is to destroy these borders, that one day we don't need to talk about the nation state. Because like the Communist Manifesto said, then the worker has no nation. You know, the worker has no nation. The toilers of all lands belong to each other, which throughout history hasn't played out the way it should play out, because like white workers of the world unite, that necessarily defeats that statement. So, but that is the ideal. And now this ideal we must infuse with principle. We can't have ideals without principles. Because ideals are ideals. They're very nice to have ideals on justice and freedom, but you must be principial in building those ideals and building new walls. So yeah, asante sana.
Asante sana kaka, especially for bringing up, for making the links and the relations that we have had many more other Sobukos across the continent.
Mm-hmm.
That there is a lot of people, individuals, and even people who are part of organizations who have made sacrifices for their people, for their land. That the struggle we engage in today comes out of that long history of sacrifice. That we are not engaging in a new struggle, we're engaging in a continuation of a struggle which is protracted, and that we must win. And if we must win, we must be principled, we must study, we must be with the people, like Nkrumah says. Before we can speak for the people, we must live with the people, eat with the people, talk with the people, and then we get the right to speak for the people. At this particular moment, comrades,
I just wanted to add one more example. There is a revolutionary that's hardly spoken about, Eduardo Mondlane from Mozambique. He was accepted as a professor in New York State University, and he was a brilliant person, and he gave it all up and came here in Bagamoyo to lead Frelimo with Samora Machel, who was killed, of course, in a letter bomb of the Portuguese. So it's also important to remember that to have that sort of opportunity, to be a professor in that time in America as a black person, not even as a black person who was born and raised in America, but as an African, and to give it all up. So, Mondlane, it's also important to remember that.
Viva Mondlane,
viva.
Viva. At this point, I'll open up the discussion. Any questions to Petani and the brilliant submission he made? Any questions also to the addition Aliu has made are welcome. Comments are also welcome. We cannot frame a discussion in such a narrow way, but questions only, because all of us seated here bear us of knowledge. All of us seated here are engaged in different struggles, and we have different perspectives. So our additions are also welcome. Comrade Gasheke, I see you're pinching.
It's a very unrevolutionary speech.
The moderator.
Or being opportunistic that you want to speak fast. It's so inspiring, and I think I really appreciate Comrade Sungu for this and Aliu, because for a long time in this country, in the last 30 years, we have been fed a diet of liberalism and human rights. So it's refreshing to have this kind of ideological grounding. Because, and also you coming from South Africa, leading the country as this control of these years is very, very powerful. And I think we should appreciate this. This should be happening as many times as possible. And I really, maybe the question I needed to, that we can debate more and discuss more, is about the race question. And I think that one is a land from South African community, because and I wanted to ask you a question: why you call yourself Walter Rodney? Library.
People's Library.
People's Library. And with your speech and your discussion and ideas, now I can't ask you that question, because is the fit to what Walter described the working class. And I think this question of race, Walter Rodney and yourself, is something that we can also continue debating. And I'm so happy because Sobukwe has been forgotten in this, and the major role he played. Nobody knew that ANC was there in 1912. Communist Party was there by 1920s. But the impact of the PAC and Sobukwe was so powerful. And Shapoval's Lango massacre is associated with the ANC and Mandela, but not with And that's how the imperialists write history and canonize those people who do not be who are not there. And this is so inspiring that we continue debating this about Sobukwe. And also that the question is that, because I relate with this, here in Kenya we have 30 years. And, very little has happened in terms of interrogating our history. And people who are playing a major role. Like now, Kombo is doing what we're doing. But the politicization that has happened with civil society and human rights NGOs since 1990 has done a lot of damage in this country. And it has removed the soul of class analysis. Before I met Sungu as a young student from university, I used to be some pretty good organization like Apahamu, Medical Legal Unity, Kenya Human Rights Commission. Let me tell you, if you dared say the word imperialism, you would be look like you're mad. Yeah. So you see how far we have come from. That's Kombo's Library can host this comrades here, and we discuss about this idea. So the question I needed first of all to debate, you can debate, is about the race question. The race question is very important. If we can discuss, and how can we relate it with our settler colony Kenya, and Kenya being a colonial state. How can we debate it? Do we still have white settlers in Kenya? And why is it not question not interrogated? Yeah. And why do we fear to discuss about it? Yeah? And powerful question, comrade also brought it about. Also, this question I needed to ask. Maybe Kenyan comrades, Kenyan comrade can answer, like the Marxist Professor Manganga. Is Kenyan Marxist dogmatic? Are we preaching a lot of Marx without practice? We a lot of preaching of Marx, how Karl Marx did this. Are we teaching our people about industrial revolution with proletariat in Europe? And we're not discussing about how the crisis of capitalism, the lumpenization of everybody, even university professors. You see, that's a question, because I find a very powerful departure from Sobukwe. There's something you pose about communism and how it was framed and how Sobukwe saw it.
In the Pan-African context.
Is it a question for Kenya today, or it has been overtaken? And lastly, Edward Mudlani was a professor from university. His book is here. There was a meeting between Edward Mudlani and Pyoga Mapinga. I don't know whether anybody know about that.
She does.
Not she does. The book for Edward Mudlani is here.
I think it's from Panaf, right?
Yeah,
Panaf book, yes.
Yeah, and he said in a tricontinental meeting in India, the representation for guerrilla movement in Kenya in 1950 something, in 1960s, the representatives after independent, the person who was there was, he didn't call him Pio Gamapinto, but Pio Pinto. And when that question was coming about, let's demobilize guerrilla movement, let's continue fighting, as Pinto stood and defended the question of armed struggle. It's so powerful that it's a small line in that book of Edward Mudlani. But he quote Pinto, saying Pinto opposed the camps that was saying that the era of armed struggle has ended. Yeah. And he named Pinto as one of the leaders of Mau Mau. And that's so very powerful that Aluba said that these people are not superhuman. But one individual made a major contribution to take the struggle for Pan-Africa and liberation struggle forward. So I rest there, but I'm very inspired. And Maganga and my comrade Sungu organized this. I think we need this refreshing for
and Brian and Joki.
I am not sure whether Brian and Joki, because are they member of the Revolution Communist Party now? And Brian and Joki.
Just before Petani jumps in, just to remind us that yesterday was the 58th anniversary of the assassination of Pio Pinto.
Yeah.
Is
Was
it
This
That
was
was-
the second Kenyan matter.
He was murdered in 1965.
Yes.
I read about him already.
Continue, comrade. And I see Jogi some hands up.
So what should I do?
How many questions will you take?
No, it's fine. 3.
Three. Okay. I'll go to Njoki. Then who is next?
Brian.
Okay, Brian is next.
I stand with Brian.
Viva comrades, viva.
Viva.
First, I'd like to apologize. I've been trying to multitask. I was supposed to moderate the session, but I got an emergency. But this has been a very powerful conversation, and one of the things that I've been reflecting deeply about is the need to decolonize our law. You know, we keep talking about this pseudo independence, but neocolonialism literally just absorbed and adapted all the tools of and operations of colonialism. So when you talk about the Sobukwe clause and how it was created to actually ensure that he's kept away and he's kept silent, it brings about the question of the law being, for the privilege and, being used as a tool to subdue a people. I take a lot of interest in because I am a student of law, and I've been interacting a lot with our context and our law and how it is founded really on the colonial master and how it's never really reflected our realities. And I know you also are a student of law. So, what does the Sobukwe clause, mean to you? And the fact that for a very long time, not really, even when we're talking about the pseudo independence and the liberation of the people, we've never been really keen on addressing the law and how it's used to, subdue the people, and how it's a tool of the privilege and of the ruling class. So yeah, that's what I've really been trying to interact with.
Thank you, comrade. Brian?
Thanks, comrade. I was trying to consult the media. Thanks, comrade Njoki, for that intervention. Viva, comrade, viva.
Viva.
Long live internationalism, long live.
Long live.
One thing is to say that this library has acted now as a hub for hosting liberation struggles internationally. I can see Comrade Moas is here and Comrade Asua, who are just from South Africa, who have come from South Africa in the Nkrumah school. So they have experience that, they have a lifetime experience that they will share with us as we continue. And I know if Moas and Asua that one we discuss about it. But so the one thing to say is that this reflection is very, very important. It's very, very timely. I was talking with Adil this morning, and he was saying that, and he was telling me that an organization is very, very important. So one thing to say before I start my reflection is that I can see Comrade here, Julius, who has founded the Usawa Party. Who has founded the Usawa Party, a political party. But he'll tell us, he decided to sell it to the bourgeois. So he'll tell us about it, because Usawa means equality. And this is a very important conversation, because at this time we are facing a very big crisis in the in the organization of in both the Vanguard Party and the social justice movement. So we really need to build a movement. And what we can reflect about Sobukwe, one is to say that, this song that goes, Nkosi sikeleli Afrika, na 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 na. That song, we have adopted the tune and we you have said how do we start the wimbo wa mapambano? Kupigwa na kupokonywa maisha hakutatuzuia sisi wananchi. Good, great. Thank you. So that song is inspired by the struggles of Sobukwe. And we have the struggles for those who came before us. In fact, there is someone who is called anaitwa nani mwenye compose hiyo wimbo? Hapana, sio Karim Ndudu, anaitwa the brother to Kangara Wajabi. Yeah, Kangara Wajabi. Yeah, with Karim Ndudu. Yeah, Kangara Wajabi na Karim Ndudu and other RPP comrades composed that song, but they gave it the lyrical for the song of the struggle. That is that was one major contribution that makes this very relevant and connects our social justice movement struggle and the struggle for Sobukwe. So one thing is about building an organization, because Sobukwe built an organization, and he was building an organization, and he connected Pan-Africanism with Marxism. He's the only person that we can connect his struggle on Pan-Africanism and Marxism, because his ideology was connected on Pan-Africanism. Because one thing that we can say about Pan-Africanism now, if Gashek has not addressed it, I thought he could have addressed it. Having Museveni, the person with coordinating the Pan-African movement, in Kenya, in Africa is a thing to reflect upon. From the reflections that you have been given by Aliu and our comrade from South Africa. So we really need to build an organization, because if we are to host Pan-Africanism here, that means that we have to build a revolutionary organization. We really need to build a revolutionary organization, because all these conversations, I know the MOAS can host us, can host all the conversations here, but if we don't have an actionable form of connecting all our struggles in one organization, a united front, we cannot defeat Museveni, because one, he has capital, he can mobilize us all. I know Aliu, when we were invited to Ugandan State House, and you have all the privileges, and you are invited to participate in a Pan-African meeting, you will go there. So
you're criticizing me direct.
Just say it as it is. Without using my name.
I know
you're criticizing me indirect.
No, I'm telling you, because it's from the Gambia. I know Maganga will consult us. He will consult us. He will. Yeah, because we really need to build Pan-Africanism. Yeah, because Pan-Africanism has really degenerated from what we really need. What we talked about. Yeah, they talk about Walter Rodney, who is talking about Pan-Africanism, and this was a very huge topic. Because that time that Sobukwe had even differences with Mandela. Yeah, very fierce differences, and you can tell even Nkrumah and Nyerere are arguing about how we build Pan-Africanism, because we have to have a methodology. Because Pan-Africanism is not something that we shall achieve tomorrow. So, and I don't want to talk much, because this is not my conversation. Secondly, is that to say that I talked about the song, and let's say about intellectualism. I think it's time that we really have to define our intellectualism. I think for a long time we have been talking about intellectualism in general form. Let's now be very, very, very specific on intellectualism and say that we need to build organic intellectualism, because for the longest time I think with the organic intellectuals network is something that is giving us a lot of hope. And talking about Pan-Africanism and the ideology in the movement is of course something that we really need to build about, because forming the Usawa Party means you have consciousness that people are struggling, that people need to move to the next stage, that people need to organize, that people need to be in an organization, and you understand that. But the point about capital, if we are subdued to the capitalist tendency of organizing, when Baba says that we have a meeting and people meet at Jibanji, what does that mean for us? What is our organization like? And what if we had a united front, even with the Usawa Party, when it is organized within our circles? When it has revolutionary comrades. Who is this person who is running Usawa Party? It's called who? Mangaliso. So who is that person? But it's not what I am.
The Kikuyu chauvinist.
Yeah, Kikuyu chauvinist. I'm just saying because yeah. Gasheke has started a party. Who? Is an uncle to Gasheke? They are related. Okay. Yeah, but Gasheke is a revolutionary. He's in the Communist Party. So I think. The Communist Party we are trying, but we're trying. So let me say that it is very important that in this reflection, because it was really, very, very important that we meet here so that we can discuss about where we are going, because those reflections were very rich, and to get that all these people can attend this forum and discuss ideologically about the struggle of South Africans, about the struggle in the Gambia, relate to all these changes. In fact, I think I'll not talk much because in my time I want to
something to speak about.
In CPK, I think someone will talk about it. I will not talk about CPK. In fact, what I will talk about is the Young Communist League. Yeah. So my time is up. Comrade, you can say something very short about
CPK.
Yeah. We can share your time and then you give it back to the
Long live Communist Party of Kenya, long live. Long live. Forward with the class analysis, struggle forward.
Is Kinuke comes
sharing.
I'll ask Petani and Aliu to respond to the submission so far, and then I'll open the floor again. Is that okay? Okay, sawa.
Can I comment about that law thing?
Yes, the one of the
So, when we look at the legal system, from the very beginning of the founding of the nation state, the bourgeois state, of course, this state that we so revere and we fight for, because every time we protest, we actually make the state look good. Because you see, there's freedom of assembly, there's freedom of expression. Every time we criticize it, by attacking the state on that level, we actually magnify its presence in our lives. And that's very important to recognize, because the law was never created for our people. It was never created for poor people or for black people at all. All these laws we have now, they were, because the law is a superstructure that protects the economic and productive base of capital. And so we cannot decolonize the law without doing away with the state. The state, we cannot have a decolonial legal system, a decolonized legal system, without the withering away of the bourgeois state as we know it. Because it would be it wouldn't make sense, at least scientifically, So, because when we look at, for example, there's one little illustration is the bail question, right? Bail. Bailing people was created so that rich people will not spend time in jail. But they have to make it look like we are all equal under the law. And then they're like, Maganga, you're arrested, you have to pay 3 million bail bond. And here is the richest man in Kenya who was arrested with you drinking in somewhere you shouldn't be drinking. Or at what time? I don't know why I'm using that as an example. But, So you get arrested, you get go there now at the police station. Who would go home? Of course, the rich person. Where would Magang get 3 million in the span of 30 minutes? But you have to make it look like we all can have these resources. Or when you go to when poor people are evicted, or they now you come, you're like, yeah, we are not leaving this place. You just stay there and wait. Oh, you know how they say, one person, where your vote is your right, is your voice. It makes the citizen go and vote and then go to the state house and demand your rights from them. You will be beaten. They don't. So all of this is a superstructure. It's not real. It is meant. It's a dialectical process. How the superstructure maintains the base and how the base shapes that superstructure. So for me, it's we can't have a righteous legal system or laws that would benefit our people without dismantling the productive base of capital. The capital must be destroyed completely, and we must have a socialist mode of production or communist economic system without the bourgeois state. That's the only time the law can benefit the suffering, toiling masses of our people. Yeah.
Okay, I will start with the one from Asheke on the question of the race, and also how do we relate settler colonialism to Kenya today. In our case, unfortunately, we didn't kick them out. In actual fact, some things which are always said, lies about the PAC, said that the PAC said that they were going to drive by people to the sea so that they can leave their country. Well, it was not wrong. We want to do it. They must go, basically, because they're settlers. And they were not willing to give up the land. So what else did we do? We're going to kill them, same way the Mama was doing. So, in actual fact, something that I forgot to mention that is really important, that links the struggle of then Christian in South Africa to the Mau Mau movement. So, immediately after the PAC was banned, we had to go underground, and we formed a movement in September 1961. It's very important. The ANC forms somewhere after us. I think 61, if not October. I was just from September 61. And it was called POT. Same way as the Mama operated. It was not Mickey Mouse movement of trying to appease by people. In fact, the first attack that we did was in a police station in a place called Paarl in Cape Town, where members of the PAC who supported the PAC in Cape Town went with machetes and slaughtered a number of white people, which they killed more, in Paarl. And the movement was called POT. It was the first armed struggle movement which was launched. Later to be called APLA, which was based in Tanzania. So I can guarantee you now that 0 white people were killed by MK. 0 white people were killed by MK, the so-called liberation movement of the ANC. But the importance of the question of race, linking it to the yeah.
Is it killing white people? Is just killing white people?
No.
Mau Mau used to slaughter them.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is
it's not for fun. You know why? Because
it might be adventurism.
Yeah, of course. But the importance is that the site of struggle was in the land, was the question of the land. So the struggle was going to be fought on the basis of that we want back the land, right? And at the time, who had the land? It's white people. So bring back our land, they don't want. What else are we going to do?
They weren't giving it back.
They won't give it back. So we have to go to the bushes and fight them. So it was not a matter that we're killing them because it was fun. And
although they were killing us because of fun.
Yeah, yes, you know. So the importance of Mau Mau and Pogba is that we're not killing white people because we're not fighting them because we hate them because they are white, but we hate them because we associate them with our oppression. It's something that Sobukwe says that one cannot honestly say when he was asked about when the PAC was being accused of being anti-white, one cannot say that they hate the Shambok that beats them, also without hating the person who wins the Shambok. We have to get rid of both. The Shambok represent the oppression, and the Wilder represent white people who are oppressing us. So it was no other way. So on the question of race in South Africa is that we believe that there's only one human race, of course, and the race, there's only one race which is the human race. And race is the social construct created to exploit people and also express and open new markets of capitalism, right? So in the context of the colonies, race was used as a modality to express the class interests of capitalism, right? So in our understanding of the question of race in the PAC, we believe that once we get rid of the oppression, there will be nothing to hate or fight against white people, because all oppression will have been removed. So we're not fighting against them because they are white. We're not interested in how they look like. We're interested in the question that they occupied the very basis of why we are colonized in the midst of which is our land. And any other means of peaceful engagement has failed. You know, after that bill in 61, 60, Sobukwe said that now that the white man has retreated to his favorite tool, which is the gun, it appears that confrontation is inevitable. And how is this important in the sense of launching our armed struggle? And our armed struggle was clearly against settler colonialism. And settler colonialism was expressed by the presence of white people in our land. So we're not killing them because they are white. So to fight the question of race is not that, in actual fact, the PAC believed in the question of non-racialism. That non-racialism is our end goal, right? But right now we have to deal with racial antagonisms which exist in our country today, and that's why the African people must organize amongst themselves to get to the end goal of where we have resolved the question of racism. But the end goal is non-racialism. So to the ANC, the end goal was already reached. Oh no, multiracialism is black, it is colored. That's why they even did the rainbow nation thing, because they were afraid to question the basis of the important question of racial antagonism in South Africa. And it remains today that South Africa is a country that is divided amongst race and class, right? White people are still generally are organizing themselves along the question of race, right? And that's very important to mention also. But in before 1994, Bigo will say that it was easy to mobilize black people because the enemy was clear, it was white. But post 1994 South Africa, it has become difficult. It is not explicitly a race struggle, but it is very much intertwined with the question of class. I mean, I'm not going to stand in front of a gun if a white person is shooting Ramaphosa. I'm gonna shoot that nigga.
Yeah.
I'm like, why should I defend a person like Ramaphosa? I can't defend the man, right? But when we were in the times of apartheid, it was almost easier for us to mobilize the question of race. But also there were class antagonisms which were developing. So our understanding of race is that you are not racialized because of the color of your skin, but also as a tool of how to do what to exploit you. Like for example, the Irish were they look like the British, but they were racialized, you know. Mm. So in some quarters of some fellows who lack a proper grasp of history, so they say no, you know, white people came from Europe to have sex with us. Some arguments which are being said in my country. Imagine crisscrossing the Atlantic with all those hazards, and your ship almost capsizing, and you are here just to have sex with black people. This is some fellows in some school of thought that don't take seriously, and we understand that the reason why settler colonialism happened in Africa was the expansion of European markets to exploit the African people and the people of the world, not only just us, right? So. In today's time, when we speak about settler colonialism still exists in South Africa, but in Kenya, it's a good thing that you chase them away. But I have not seen them since I got here.
No.
Where are they?
That's why.
Yeah, it's lots of them.
Chineke. I thought they left.
That's why
No, they
I asked the question
Yeah.
because
I can help
the
answer.
biggest owners of land,
Yeah.
agricultural land
Yeah.
here in Kenya, and a huge land in like Kipia, wherever, is
Great.
a white dominated land.
Really?
Really, yes.
Yeah.
You see the
What
problem.
have you been doing 6 years of liberation?
No. What's the
What have
problem?
you guys been doing?
That's not fun.
The problem is this. The problem is this in this country.
Yeah.
Because of the repressive apartheid regime and intellectual like Steve Biko and the continued work that has happened before. The South Africa, the question of the race and its domination for the black people in South Africa has been illuminated. But here, because of the petty bourgeois class that came to power, like in South Africa, they covered, they obscured that
The reality of the race.
the reality of the race question that you don't know here in this country. Just recently, not many years ago, and it's good Aluba has alluded to that. A white farmer shot somebody in his land, like he was for fun. Yeah, it's not a long time, for fun. He shot him and he thought he was shooting an antelope, and then he killed. That one did not die. Then he shot another one and he killed. The first one died. Yes.
Yeah.
And the second one.
This was like some few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I posted it on my Facebook, and then I was talking about it, that we should kill him, and they were Gambians and like,
And I can tell
why are
you,
advocating violence.
and I can tell you, some prominent human rights organizations were against us posing this question as a race question.
What is it?
Yeah. So this
Question?
so these issues of the race here in this country, it has not been done social investigation and debated. We still have the British Army here in this country. They're still raping our women in like
Saw them in Nuki.
Nyuki. They still own a lot of land here, and you still worship them for sure. And I think this is something that we can build on with the Walter Rodney People's Library on how to interrogate the race question, especially in former settler colony like Kenya, Zimbabwe, and in fact the white people, the white Boers who are expelled in Zimbabwe, they are based here in Gilgit. They came and bought land here in Kenya. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
They're here.
Yeah, they are here.
Why are they not going home?
Yeah, they didn't go home because they fear going dying because of cold there. But then, that's another debate we can discuss.
Okay. Yeah.
Petani,
Yeah,
please
let-
go on,
let-
then we
let-
open
let-
up
let me
the
just-
second round.
Yes, for Yogi's question, the question of the law in South Africa, how is it used to as a tool of oppression? So in 1864, that fellow called Citizen Rhodes, the one who is Rhodesia named after. No, in 2014 we did Rhodes Must Fall there in the University of Cape Town, because there was this statue there in the University of Cape Town.
Even the Rhodes Scholarship him.
Is him? Yeah.
And hey,
Even
people love that.
you know what the name said? That he wants to colonize Africa from Cape to Cairo. There's a road called the N1 in South Africa. I don't know if it gets to Cairo, but I know it gets to Zimbabwe and Zambia. That road was supposed to be built from Cape Town up until Cairo.
It was his plan
It was his plan
to colonize,
to colonize Africa from Cape to Cairo.
and then he died.
The African Development Bank financed its completion.
So
Really.
yeah,
The World Bank.
so the Glen Grey Act of 1864 in South Africa was an act enacted, and it was advocated for by Citizen Rhodes. He said, no, we are going to ban all African Xhosa men, because it was in the Xhosa land after the defeat of the Xhosa people in the frontier wars, the 100 years wars that I mentioned. That now we are going to ban all these fellows, all these men who are owning land, to having possession of land, so that they can become workers. So this is the start of the proletarianization of the African people. You are banned from owning land, so it means that if you don't own land, you don't have livestock anymore. Because where's the livestock going to graze? Once it grazes in someone's land, now it's going to be confiscated, or you're going to be arrested, or that you're trespassing someone's land. So then that's when they were turned into become laborers, right? And then in 1913, we had the 1913 Land Act, which took 93% of our land, and then the black people were left cramped into the 7% of the land. And in 1916, the first secretary of the ANC writes, by the name of Sol Plaatje, writes that awakening on June 13th, June 13th, June 16th, 1913, the African indigenous person had become a pariah in his own land. So when the land, in fact, one thing which is not really mentioned in most of our discourses, we speak about the question of the land, but we must also speak about the question of stock theft. Because stock theft and also taking of animals that we used to have in our homes was also another trampling upon on the means of production and the productive forces that the African people had. So what came with this was also the taking of our cows, taking of our sheep, and taking of our goats by white people, right? So in 1913, they took 90% of the land. So and then in 1955, the Freedom Charter is also another expression of how the law, white law, is used to do what? To justify the question of the land. The ANC in 1955 was saying that our land belongs to all who live in it, black and white. But let me tell you a personal story.
The Freedom Charter is for the ANC.
Yes.
Or it's for the whole.
It was imposed. The party which rejected it at the time was the PAC, which was formed later in what you call it, in 1959, right? So while the PAC was being formed in 1959 and the ANC was adopting the Freedom Charter as bastion, saying that the land belongs to all. The land shall be shared amongst those who live in it. My great grandfather was given a track pass in 1959. So the ANC is telling us in 1955 that there's no question of the land, that all the land belongs to us. But in 1959, my great grandfather had to move from the place where they were living, and then they moved to the present day, to the area where we live in, which is in Evander. So they had to be given a track pass. So a track pass was, you go to the government official, say that, hey, I want to move from point A to point B, and they're given that track pass. So in that movement of the track pass, what my grandfather tells me that they had over 400 to 600 cows, and when they reached their destination, they only had around 10 cows, and they had around close to 600 sheep and goats. You could not travel with them because you had to pay 10 rands for each, which is a lot of money at there. And then people took those cows and then they auctioned them for themselves. So it's very important to look at the dishonesty of the preamble of the Constitution of South Africa. It says that we, the people of South Africa, recognize what? Our past. And we come here together to declare that South Africa is a new country that has been formed. So the continuation of the Constitution of South Africa of 1996, the 1955 Freedom Charter, the 1913 Land Act, the 1864 Glen Grey Land Act, which spoke that African people are not allowed to own land, just shows you that the law as the superstructure that is used as a tool to continually dispossess the African people has never been neutral, and it has always been the tool for the bourgeoisie that has been used to oppress people and dispossess of them of their land. So in any settler colony in Africa, there's a land act that exists somewhere that says that the land must be taken by people. That has been the position of the law, and the reality of how the law has been used in contemporary settler colonial states of Africa.
But it's also important to recognize how the law in the colonial and neo-colonial state de-racializes law and declasses it, you know, that law is supposed to, like I was saying earlier, how the law is supposed to be this neutral sort of ground, this neutral sort of set of codes and rituals, and we see that playing out. So it's very important to recognize how the law in the settler colony don't recognize the racialization of society, doesn't recognize the classification or the stratification of society. It is it treats everybody as an equal. It aspires, yes.
It says it.
So yeah, so that we are all human beings were born equal, But implicit in that very saying is that who is the human being? You know, in this chain of being, you know, that has been created by Western modernity, who is the human being, and where is that humanity located? You know, so that's also part of our struggle as the thing about the race question is that race also appears both as superstructure and as base. It appears on both ends of the spectrum, you know, because at the base, who is the one whose back is bent and the whole walk, that at the bottom of labor of the toilers is the black worker, and the machine and everything is pegged on it. You know, so and that's a productive issue. Capitalism's racialization starts from its inception. You know, in the plantations, without the enslavement of Africans, there would have never been the primitive accumulation or the capital that was needed for capitalism to exist. And it's always good to remember that. And
Why is it always good to remember that?
to remember, it's good to remember it because they, you know, what they call in these Marxist circles the labor aristocracy, for example. I don't know if some of us are familiar with this. The thing is that there is this false false universal that is within the progressive movement that we are all just, it's all about the workers, you know, it's not about, but I mean, he said it clearly that when the South African Communist Party was there saying white workers of the world unite, they were very clear which workers they wanted to unite. So this there's this reductionism that happens in the sort of communist socialist movement to not see, because there are times when race becomes a primary contradiction, not class. So race becomes it occupies the site of the class struggle, like Palestine right now. You know, it's a complicated situation. You cannot just say, "Oh, this is a class issue." You know, because there's a deep racial issue there. When South Africans were fighting against apartheid, it was a racial question. The race was very, very primary to that equation. You cannot just say it's a class struggle. Today, the black people in America are fighting, you know, and you can't just reduce that to, I mean, even Patmore's frustration with the Communist International, what would lead him to write Pan-Africanism or communism, was that same racial question. Du Bois will deal with it. Every black communist, all his life, literally, this has been at the core. So we cannot just do a reduction of our struggle to just a class struggle and then leave it at that. Race, class, and gender, you know, which these are very deep discussions that have been happening. So it's important to always remember that there are, like I was saying, what Fanon said, you are white because you are wealthy because you are white in the colony. And we see that
the superstructure, and the superstructure is the
base. Yes.
Comrade, I'll ask that you post there so we can take the second round of questions and comments. I see Asua's hand is up, Okot's hand is up, Maganga's hand is up. And okay, Sasa,
I intended
from
to keep
the
quiet, but Leo keeps triggering me every time. Yeah, so
in a good way.
yeah, in a good way. So I had a very heated discussion in South Africa with my comrades from Germany and some other European countries about this race question. And while there, when I was looking at the liberation struggles and why South Africans are so mad at the ANC, well, I am always mad at Mandela, but when I got to South Africa and like got first-hand stories from people, it even made me more mad. And stories about the struggle of Namibia and Angola, and how everyone literally did not forget about South Africa when they were struggling for liberation. When this nigga comes out of prison and starts speaking about peace without without tackling the land question, it was such. But yeah, the reason why the race question in Kenya is a bit complicated is how the British did their project here. Maganga and Mwangi sometimes say the British look back and they say Kenya was their best imperial project. Because things happen, but there's a way you make them subtle, you make them not so promiscuous. And then coupled with what Gasheke usually says, that it is the backyard of imperialism. It is so good at PR, it doesn't look like it's this settler colony with settlers still owning 6 million acres of land, and they still keep dispossessing people of their land with this conservancy nonsense. And now they're talking about pastoralists looking for sustainable lifestyle because their lifestyle is old school. But you know what's funny? Is they tell pastoralists the rangelands are overburdened, they should stop keeping livestock, find other things to do. Then the next thing, some European guy comes there and keeps livestock that the Maasai were keeping, and they're telling them your lifestyle is outdated. So it's bad for the Maasai to keep large herds of livestock, but it's not bad for... Anyway, back to the question before I go on a tangent. The reason why it's complicated is because, and I learned this much later, because I also didn't think there was such a big race question in Kenya, because I come from the western part of Kenya. Nobody really cares about being oppressed on the basis of their race. But when I started doing work around ecological issues, the race question is so glaring, because you look at people who are always accumulating land. It is the Europeans in this country who are always accumulating land. They have big military bases here, which they do their artillery attacks on. They almost poisoned the water table when they're doing their tests. So we were looking at a possibility of people dying because someone decided to do their military test in a water ecosystem that serves so many Kenyans. And there's so many things. There's the sulfur thing, where they dumped things in Turkana. So they have a playing ground here. But because Kenya has this very good PR, it looks like it's not happening. And when you go to the coast, apartheid is still there. Like literally, there are places you can't go if you're not European. Even if you have the money, you can't go there. It's specifically for them. Just near the Nairobi National Park, there's a place you can't go. They don't explicitly say you can't go there, but you'll go there and you'll be told to go back. Even here in Muthaiga, there are places where Black people are not allowed to go. They'll ask you, what are you going to do there? Next to where I live, I didn't know there were settlers there, but there's like some farmlands just lying there. And when you go there, like the chiefs, which is what they used to do when we still had the colonial administration, they'll call and say there's a Kenyan who has trespassed. Can you imagine in your own country? Say there's someone who's trespassed your territory, they're not supposed to trespass. And these things are like happening here. So what they did is they had these premier schools and these scholarships, Rhodes, Fulbright, whatever, where they would take Kenyans and literally make them mini Britons. So you take someone to Alliance, Sarehem, Maseno.
Don't forget Ayali, Mandela Washington Fellowship.
You train them to be Britons, like the culture, the way they eat, the way they dress, everything. So we have Black proxies with European faces behind them. If you look at this startup thing with this technology, there's a whole race question behind it. I've been in this university and seen people come up with brilliant ideas, toil at night, they don't get money. The moment a European stands behind them, they suddenly get money for their startup. So it is very subtle here because they have Black proxies in front of them, but they are very much here. Every time I work with British people, the very first time they land at the airport, they always tell me, the Britons never left your country. Because it is so clear to them how they are still here. Like right from the airport, the systems, the way they operate. They remove your shoes, remove your jacket. When you have locks or you have the Islam thing, you know, you go through a different interrogation. When we were going to South Africa, Nimtes and I, because we had locks, our interrogation process was different from anybody else, because at least this was look like well colonized Kenyans. This ones, I think they are rebels. This is what are you going to do in South Africa? Yeah, can you leave your numbers here just in case? When we went to South Africa, they were like, please be precise. How long are you going to be in South Africa? Are you sure you're going to leave on that day? In our passports, myself, Nimches, and Halima, they wrote like they're supposed to get out of South Africa on the 26th. If they don't, they'll be held to pay. So it's a question that Gasheke has already said. It's very much obscured. We still have our schools treating people like Britons. Like our hair is illegal in school. You have to shave and have a tie. You're in a hot secondary school in Mombasa, but you have to look like this Briton in a suit and a tie and speak good English and everything. It is so bad, and I really get mad. In fact, I was so mad when I was asked in my country, what am I doing in Muthaiga? I was supposed to go to Muthaiga. So they happen, comrade. The Britons never left. In fact, they are more comfortable in Kenya because they have a veil to hide behind, so they don't have to be openly racist. They have these black people, they have given scholarships to put up the face for them. But they are very much here. And there are places like in the coast, in Laikipia, in some parts of Nairobi, and now in the rangelands where the race question is so bad because Europeans are taking over people's land by force. I usually tell people that in Kenya now, when you say the farmer, you have to be very specific. Are you talking about the smallholder farmer? Or you're talking about the European farmer with the gun and everything who is dispossessing people of their land? And it is extending now across so many different countries now. There's this conversation about business and human rights. But if you look at it critically, it's about dispossessing indigenous people and pastoralists of their land so that we have investments. And now they're saying we are in a dilemma where there's climate change that we need to sort, but Africa is also poor. We need investors to lift people out of poverty. And you ask yourself this question every
So, human beings are the same. One thing that we need to understand, we share the same blood, we share the same, whatever, all those kind of things. How the evolution, how the people, we believe that human being evolved. You know? And what we have to ask ourselves, what caused this division? Yeah, it is a fact. There is racial in our country, more
more specifically South Africa. But we have to ask ourselves, how did it come to be? And to me, I tend to believe is based on the system. Because I specifically tackle the capitalism. And take an example of when were these Dutch going all around Africa, taking our people to maybe European, taking our people to Latin America and those kind of things. So and maybe to cut the thing, I don't want to go the history. Maybe go back. Let's tackle the system. Take an example. I take an example of US. In US, there are many, whatever happened, our people went there. They abolished the whatever after struggle, all those kind of struggle. They were able maybe to defeat the whatever, to change maybe to abolish the slavery. And this kind of slavery, why was it abolished? Why was it abolished? One, you realize the resistance of the black people. The other thing is related to the capitalism. Forces of production. You realize that slavery is not that productive now. What do? We get rid of the slaves, and then we come up with workers. You realize that those who produce well are workers. But why these are capital, these are ruling class. You realize that, they are workers, majority of them are black because they don't have own anything, but they're also white workers. No, we want to rule, we want to dominate these workers. What are we going to do? Create division. Let's indoctrinate our fellow workers with either ideas that they are superior than black people. And you can realize the Ku Klux. How did the Ku Klux come to be? Those kind of things. So I think those are some of the things that we need to study carefully to understand. Maybe in the Kenya, as Asua is saying, is a more complex, because one thing, if you are not careful, the ruling class, the way they do, the European how they do, because the new colonial regime today, I think they are ruled by African, isn't it? Who are led, isn't it? But the situation is the same as during the colonial time. The land is occupied by white and some rich Kenyans, isn't it? But what do they do in our country? Sometimes they come up with a strategy. We are different, yeah. We are not. We share the different culture among. Yeah, we are Kenyans, but we have different nationalities, and those nationalities have their own culture and all different things. So what ruling class do is to kind of cultivate this kind of thing. That you are better, you mean, to break this kind of unit. So I think we need to analyze this critically, this issue, because if we go face value, we might get lost. There is racialism and all those kind of things. But what kind of thing? Take an example of the Kenya coast. Most of the coast land is owned, let's say, by Kikuyu, huge kind of thing. And if you go to the coastal list, and that's why any Kikuyu president is very unpopular in Kikuyu region, in coastal region, because the ruling class there, they have the base, You're being ruled by Kikuyu. Who own this land? Who own this land? Those kind of things. So I think that's why maybe it's kind of a thing that we need to be critical and also we need to mobilize people also. These kind of things, you know, there is a situation that it can be principle contradiction, and there's some situation it can be a secondary contradiction. So we need to navigate through. It is based on the level of the masses also. So being and to navigate this through, to navigate is not an easy thing. Being a party leader, maybe, and this can be so can kind of a thing be tackled by organization, either political party, any kind of organization, and that organization has to be equipped with this kind of scientific outlook, because you'll be able to navigate very well, to know this. Hey, I'm going to rural areas, their experience ratio is kabisa. So you have to be tactical in a way to see how the system is kind of related to ratio. So those are some of the things maybe I think we need to be keen, to be careful, and also not to understand the difference in a continent. We are also different in a way. The way South African are for now, we are not in the same enemy. We kind of to them racially. I understand the way you are basing your argument. I understand. I have been told how the South African, how they're being treated and all those kind of things. But we need to be careful not to lose sight and maybe find ourselves. Fighting among ourselves, and also there. Because the other white maybe who have analyzed, and they can be in this kind of struggle fighting racialism and all this kind of things can be our so those are some of the things I think we need to be careful with. But mostly is to be scientific in a way, to study this critically, and because once you study this scientifically and you equip yourselves, you will be able to navigate through and to win masses and to overcome. Because the primary thing, unless you get rid of the system, there's no way you tackle the issue of racial. Unless you get rid of the capitalist system, it will be difficult to handle to get rid of the issue. Sorry, maybe let me stop it there.
Thank you, Comrade Kimani. I think Okot had a submission, then Kinikia, then Maganga will close us off in this one.
Well, thank you. For those who have never met, my name is Mangaliso Sobukwe, and I'm happy to be here. I was not aware of this meeting. I was in Westlands. I was just walking around. Mobi just told me that she's here. I was just coming to look for Mobi. I didn't know that there was a meeting here, and that's the reason why when I came, because I came by foot from Westlands up here. So when I came to that seat, I was sleeping, somehow, and then I realized that the video was being taken. I felt ashamed about it. Sometimes, when you're not taking you, it can really shame you. Anyway, but it's very good to be here. I've really found the comrades are here. Mine is observation, a very simple comment. It's about the issue of organizing Pan-Africanism and understanding these things. Because for one,
the way currently we are organizing these things, people have really made this Pan-Africanism look so academic. It has become a very academic affair, and that's the reason why so many people they link themselves with the issue of Pan-Africanism. So, people have been labeled that if you cannot even mention these names here, you're not a Pan-African. You cannot mention these names here. So also we need to delink Pan-Africanism from being so much academic, and there is a kind of struggle that people usually see that as if those are not Pan-African struggle. Have we done our power analysis to know whom are we fighting? Because for example, I think it's 2015, 2014, when UK said that they no longer be in the European Union. I also myself, because I'm a Pan-African, I said that now's the time now, because we're also tired here in Kenya, because there are so many countries that in Africa that was ruled by the British, calling themselves the Commonwealth countries. So by the time British exited from European Union, I think it's 2015, and they said they're leaving the exiting European Union, and at the same time, they're trying to strengthen their power within the Commonwealth countries. So I thought about why are they exiting European Union? They want to strengthen Commonwealth. Commonwealth that starts from Canada, Kenya, all the way from Australia to India. They want to strengthen. Why? Why are they leaving that? Why are they leaving the union there? The exiting European Union, they want to strengthen that. So in 2016, I started the campaign. That's why sometimes when you talk about Pan-Africanism, sometimes I always think that it's just a plastic thing. People are not ready for this thing. So I started the campaign myself. Kagasheke knew about it when I started the campaign that we should start a campaign to ask our Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta that we must have to leave this what's called British Commonwealth, because that's part of colonialism that we're talking about. Because these lands are being owned by Europeans in Nanyuki, Laikipia, and Nakuru. They're there because courtesy of being common. So I used to ask myself, what's so common in this Commonwealth? What do we share in common? Because when I say that we have a Commonwealth, there's something that we share in common. Because when I want to go to Britain, I'm telling you, getting a visa to go to Britain is as difficult. I don't know how much a person can pay. But a Briton can come from Britain, just getting a visa here at the airport, entering Kenya. I don't know how much is paid. So do you see anything common there? So what's this Commonwealth?
Sure.
Yeah, there's nothing common. So that me and the Briton, there's nothing common between me and the Briton. There's nothing common. Me going to British are very difficult, but when a British come here, what he does, he's just coming very easily. And when they come here, they're saying they're tourists, but they're just sex tourists. They're not even seeing our animals. If you see all these national parks, it is their property. Those are their property. It's not our property. And that's the reason why some people are killed here in Gilgil because of poaching. Because you are killing, our animals that we have in this country, it's not ours. It's for the British. That's why they talk about conservation of animals. They have also conservatives because those animals are theirs. They are not ours. You see, when because for example, when you go to Naivasha here, they call it game hunting. But when an African is hunting, it's called you are poaching. But they do it every day, killing our animals. So, because it's the animals, they are not ours. Even the way those conservatives are being controlled by the Britons. So they are not ours. So that time, I started the campaign of asking the government of Kenya. People, this guy I think is from Gambia. Although that Jammeh, that president of Gambia, what was the former president? Jammeh, although it was bad, but it's when he said that we will get away from this Commonwealth, I really appreciated what he does. Because that guy is a Pan-African, although people can say that he was a dictator, but he said we don't want this British Commonwealth. So the same way as Kenyans, we could have said that we don't want this British Commonwealth because it's the part of colonialism that's happening in this country. Another struggle that also, because this struggle, we need to start from somewhere. We cannot just be strong about the struggle, but don't have specific, what are you fighting for? Like, for example, here we talked about the British have a lot of land here in Nakuru. Currently now, I'm in the struggle. There's a land here. When you go to Nakuru, there's a place called Sangha. On your left, there's a land called Goga Farms Limited. That land, they have a relationship between them, and that land is owned by a Briton. You see, my grandfather came here in the 19th, and other way after the First World War. So there's a struggle of land there. The earlier director of that land left 384 acres. He said that this land belongs to the people who worked for me in this land.
That land is about 5,000 acres. So we, as people who are living there, we just want only 384 acres so that we can share among ourselves. But because that mentality of colonialism was not ended among ourselves, we find that that's how, and I've really liked this debate today. I think it also helped me that struggle that's going on there. It's called Boga Farms Limited, where this milk called Ilara came from, because they shared with Ilara milk dairies. So the struggle is continuing. So let us, as we continue this struggle, let us be specific and struggle within us. As you're saying about we want British not to be here, tell us yourself what struggle are you talking about, so that we come up with this struggle and let it be one struggle. Because sometimes it's very difficult when you're saying that no, we don't want the British, but you're telling me specifically what is that struggle that you're talking about. Let's have specific struggle. Is it about land? Who land? Which land? Because sometimes we can be living in the. What I like about South Africans, they're saying, like the Malema, this is the problems here. This is the problem. But as we are here, because, for example, today you have to understand that there are some lands that the British own lands here. But Kenyans are not talking. So it's high time that we as people, we go away from lamentation to the real thing. So each and every person must have to come with their own specific struggle. This is the struggle, the problem that we have. That's the only way I can think about it. So let's have a specific struggle. Because, and let us not make this thing Pan-African look so academic. Because sometimes when you say academic, because I don't know the name of Sankara, I don't know the name of I look so useless, and it links me from this struggle. Thank you very much. That's my short presentation.
Thank you, Comrade.
Comrades, power. So maybe mine will be just a comment, yeah. Of course, thank you, Comrade, for, of course, that analysis. Yeah? Of course, that is also an analysis of the struggle of the South African people. Yeah? And we've also mentioned some important figures in our struggle, like Pio Gama Pinto. Yeah? And something we take from that is that our struggle is interconnected. Yeah, and it is, of course, you see, a struggle against foreign domination. Yeah, so of course, the Communist Party, you know, Sobukwe inspires us. Yeah, and our organization is also Pan-African, and we of course recognize that the struggle for Pan-Africanism is also the pursuit for socialism. Yeah, and we recognize socialism as the objective, and of course scientific socialism as of course the, what do we call it now, scientific socialism as the software. So of course by now, and we, of course, at the we've also mentioned of the conversations around African socialism, but for us we recognize that already scientific socialism is it's already a science. Yeah, it's already a science, and we don't, of course, need to now start talking about of course African socialism. So there are a few things, of course, we admire and learn from our comrade Sobukwe, and one of them is very important. And I think one comrade had mentioned about the self-sacrificing spirit. Yeah? Because we recognize that history gives us all an opportunity to, of course, participate in the struggle. When conversations were still ongoing, I had someone mention about the party auctioning the workers to, of course, the state, and reminded me, of course, of the Communist Party of South Africa and their unholy alliance with, of course, the ANC. Yeah, but as we have seen and as we've said, of course, as a revolutionary, and the one thing we admire from Sobukwe is that self-sacrificing spirit. Yeah, and we have seen revolutionaries retire and auction, of course, the blood of the workers to the capitalist class. Yeah, so of course, I think it is now public knowledge for us, and of course, some of us meet regularly in this conversation. We always have this conversation about the party. So even at the party, we have a faction which maybe has already gotten tired and decided to, of course, auction the people to, of course, the ruling class. But we have to recognize that, of course, still in the party, we have a group of people that has been upholding, of course, the party line. Yeah, and one thing I remember about Sobukwe, something I think Comrade confirms that, said that Pan-Africanism was a struggle against domination, and that this is a question that will have to be answerable to our future generations. Yeah, and so of course for us, even today, we are struggling with the neoliberal globalization, and of course, very importantly, and that is a relationship of all these struggles is the struggle for land. Yeah. So maybe I can stop it there, and I allow my comrade to proceed.
Viva comrades, viva. So, first of all, thank you very much, comrade, for the comprehensive presentation regarding the situation in South Africa. And I think it's enabled most of us to see how our struggles are interconnected and how this pattern of settler colonialism unfolded in a manner that was very similar. Because when we look at the manner in which capitalism got introduced into the African continent, we see that it was similar, because it begins with a dispossession of Africans from their with the struggles of all other people that are struggling, we demonstrate that we are not dogmatic. But it is possible to be dogmatic. And I think the example you gave regarding the Communist Party of South Africa saying white workers of the world unite, and such, and even, the present example, the cooperation with the capitalists today, we can see that it is possible for there to be a sort of revisionism and a sort of breakaway from the fundamental principles that revolutionaries are supposed to stand with. And that happens because people break away from that line of working within the masses, and even simple opportunism. Because if you would like to be in the struggle but not really give up some of those privileges that being in the struggle requires you to give up, then it is possible for you to start taking this line of opportunism. Or if you're white, in the case of South Africa during that time, and it is during apartheid, and if you're white at that time, then therefore there's certain privileges that come with it. So if you don't want to lose those privileges, but you want to be in the struggle at the same time, then you become opportunist and revisionist. So it happens. It happens, and our role or our responsibility is to constantly criticize and self-criticize ourselves, to constantly evaluate our stand, our policy, so that we ensure that we do not stray towards this revisionist or opportunistic path. So no one is immune, but it can happen to you if you fail to put the interests of the people or to work with the people generally in that regard. Another thing we should remember in light of this whole discussion is that development is never in a straight line, and uneven development is an absolute law in capitalism. Uneven development is an absolute law in capitalism. What does that mean? It means we don't develop the same way. Of course, we know that capitalism emerged and developed from Western Europe, and we've talked about how the trade, the triangular trade, capturing people from Africa, taking them to the so-called New World, and having those goods back to Europe and traded all over the world, created the basis for that initial capital to kickstart the Industrial Revolution, which is what led to the development of capitalism. And therefore, that situation made Western Europe have the material basis for the development of capitalism. So, but since that situation favored particularly Western Europe and not any other part of the world, we see that it is there where capitalism emerged. And as capitalism developed throughout the world, since the conditions are not similar, we see that development becomes uneven, right? So that now we who occupy the rest of the world, we who are in the global south, we are not at par with those countries of Western Europe. And if things continue developing the way they are developing, we shall never be at par. Yeah? No matter how many proclamations, how many bodies are formed to tackle poverty and all that, we know that that will never happen. And we see that development is uneven. So therefore, where we find ourselves as Africans is in this scenario where we occupy the periphery in terms of international development, and where, therefore, our only way to advance and to develop our productive forces would require a breakaway from this system which has put us in the periphery in the first place. And that's why we must overthrow capitalism. So what are our tasks today? I think this therefore shows that our tasks can only be the unification of the continent under scientific socialism. I think that therefore shows us that that is the only way that Africa can be liberated from this present situation. Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Thank
was
you.
out. Sorry, I didn't know whether he answered my question about industrial proletariat of Europe, North Africa, and how is it that in Africa we have not gone through industrial revolution, and the political education we have, it is basically talk about the proletariat, into over. Do you find in Africa we don't have industrial revolution that is discipline the worker, trade union, all that? That's my question. And many times Marxists in this country don't answer me. I don't know why, but I'm willing to learn.
Yeah. So, and I was just trying to say, I had partially answered. I was trying to say that development is not even, and that is why in Africa today, conditions are not similar to the conditions in Europe. You see, that's why in Africa today we don't have industrial workers forming the majority of the population, etc. So if you're a Marxist organizing in Kenya, and you base your organizing on the same conditions that exist in Europe regarding the industrial proletariat and the like, then you're being dogmatic.
You're being dogmatic.
Yes, then you're being dogmatic. And it is possible for you to be dogmatic if you don't base your organizing on the people, on the masses. If you don't immerse yourself within the people, if you don't see their struggles as part of your own struggles, if you don't work towards the unification of the struggles that are already existing and the illumination of that path to actually show what the primary contradiction is, then it is possible for you to be dogmatic. But I think we Marxists in Kenya today are not dogmatic for the simple reason that we have tried to immerse ourselves in community organizing, and we have tried to see that actually conditions are not similar to conditions in Europe. So it is that understanding that development is uneven that guides us to have that point of view. And even our curriculum will be geared towards trying to solve these conditions, you see. Yeah, and even it will be geared towards, simply just understanding the situation as it is. But it is possible to be dogmatic if you're not with the masses.
When are we having
scientific socialism in the analysis?
Because of time and everything, and because we are losing people, I'll ask.
He's not going to Gambia today.
I'll ask. High moral, I'll ask Comrade Petani to respond to the submissions and to any questions that have arisen in this last round. And then after that, we will close.
Yeah, I don't have much responses because most of part of the submissions have been learning about the situation in Kenya, especially around the question of land and the question of racialism. But one submission I would like to do is that from the submission that the comrades made about the question of the land and how continuously land continues to be dispossessed in more of not in an overt manner, but in more like a soft kind of way of dispossessing land as compared to in the past when it was overt and clear. So now there's things which are introduced like more nature protection and all that was nonsense. Whereas in our case, we are trying to, for example, to feed off from animals that are in our forests for survival, but for some people it's game farming, So those are the kind of dynamics that we are also facing in post-1992 South Africa, that the question of land dispossession has not stopped. It actually has continued in a much more subtle manner, and that is the legacy that we have of neocolonialism. That although we are speaking about resolving the question of the land, it still continues in a much more subtle manner, and it is very important for us to be able to understand how this racial fragmentation also continues to manifest themselves in different settler colonies. But to make a conclusion or a remark on this lecture, that it is important, as Manga was speaking just now, that all our efforts must be focused and orchestrated towards the ultimate defeat of imperialism and building a Pan-African unity that is not just only cultural or only emotional, but it's based on true and concrete struggles that we can find snitches and links over. And that includes, most importantly, I think South Africa learning much more about the Kenyan continued question of silenced land dispossession, which continues in multi different ways, and how we can find solidarities amongst ourselves as movements and organizations who are who are struggling and are thinking about the most important question that we can ask ourselves in today's time, which is the struggle to capture state power, so that we can be able to use the state as a tool to propel ourselves forward. How we can be able to do that, because most of our struggles are happening in silos and are isolated. But if we work towards capturing state power, we can be able to defeat imperialism and neocolonialism as we are facing today. Isolate.
Thanks very much, comrade. And maybe just to add briefly to where you closed and to link it to, I think it was Brian who asked about Pan-Africanism, what it means in this day and age, when you have people like Museveni at the helm, and that whole dynamic of things, and we have to recognize Pan-Africanism in its current dimensions has been captured by certain people and certain institutions to fit certain ends. Pan-Africanism started off as a liberatory ideology. And I think the high peak of that Pan-African movement is the 5th Congress in Manchester. And we've been having these discussions in Arusha these past weeks. In 1945, when those in Manchester in the 5th Congress were very clear. Who are our enemies? It's the colonizer. Who are our friends? It's our people. How do we solve the contradiction in society? We form the mass-based parties as vehicles for organizing and for achieving national liberation. And so I think at that point we see, okay, it is a very liberatory ideology. But the Pan-Africanism of Musevenism, Pan-Africanism of dictatorships, of the African Union, of governments, of bars and restaurants. On this street here, there is a bar called Pan-African Bar and Restaurant. Pan-Africanism of banks. EcoBank calls itself the Pan-African Bank. That is not the Pan-Africanism we are talking about. It has to be a liberatory ideology. And in this day and age, it has to be Pan-Africanism from below. Because all these attempts from the top to institute Pan-Africanism don't seem to be working in this day and era. And in Arusha, one of the questions we asked, which maybe I'll just repeat, on one of the evenings we were joined by Mwalimu Isa Shivji, and we had a discussion around Pan-Africanism, a lengthy one. And one of the questions we asked him was, and which we had grappled with even in our discussions, was how do we make Pan-Africanism a viable political program again in this day and age? And there is no single answer to it. And what he told us was that there has to be an insurrection of ideas, because it is those ideas and those contestations, of course, like we've had today, we agree, we disagree, but we arrive at a certain point of thinking. It is that insurrection of ideas that will inform our action if we are to have a Pan-Africanism from below. I think we've really talked about a lot of things. Comrade Fetani gave us this brilliant presentation on Sobukwe, his history, his life, his politics, his organization, the organization he helped found, the Pan-African Congress. We've talked about Sharpeville Langa. We've talked about, he reminded us of the resolution of the national question, and that we cannot talk of national liberation as complete until we address the land question. And the land question has repeatedly come up. The rest question has repeatedly come up. Questions around ideology have come up, whether Marxism is dogmatic, and I think Comrade Maganga has responded well to it. I'm always reminded of this joke told by our comrade at Mwamko, Sana. She's from Sudan, and I really love the joke. I know I've repeated it a million times, but I'll just repeat it to avoid benefit of doubt. Because Sana says there's this joke, she had some communists there saying that a communist was standing in the middle of Baghdad with a raincoat and an umbrella, and it was hot in the afternoon, and someone passed and asked them, why are you dressed like that? And they responded, it is raining in Moscow. And that is good. I think it's just an illustration of dogma. So we have to immerse ourselves amongst our people, like Maganga said, be aware of the conditions our people live in, and base our organizing on the reality of our people and the reality of our context. Many thanks everyone for joining us in this discussion. Many thanks for all your submissions, all your questions. Many thanks to Kombozi Library for hosting us. I know we might have disrupted one of the study sessions, but we are really thankful that anytime we come to this library, we have always been welcomed with open arms. And this is one of the sites of resistance and sites of knowledge and liberated territories, few liberated territories that we can count in this neo-colonial state. Many thanks to the Walter Rodney. Hey, your library has a long name.
Just say Walter Rodney People's Library.
Okay, the full name is Walter Rodney
People's Library for Center for Ideological and Political Development.
So many thanks to Walter Rodney Library, and to Comrade Petani for joining us. I think it's been a really invigorating discussion. It has made us think. It has made us question, and we hope that it is not the last time you're visiting us or us engaging in conversation, that this will continue to be an exchange, because we must sharpen each other as we move along this path. Asanteni sana, and I think that's the...
Many thanks to Comrade who's been running around.
Many thanks to Comrade Saki for all the live streaming and all the effort around technology. We really appreciate it, because
Thanks the workers
because at least we have a link we can always go back to and refer to and say, I had so and so say this. What did they mean? Sometimes it's also good to have it for the record. Asante sana, asante wote. Mkutano umeisha.
Yes, and I hope we'll get more of these ideological problems.
Comrade, where is the library?
Space in Pretoria.
Asante.